and some rage. Digital Festival Zone 2017. Brought to you by Swisscom, Boost, Rayfacing, and Landslide. Hello everybody. Hello, inspiration.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Folks, good to see everybody here on a Friday morning. Who was at the Digital Symphony yesterday? It's pretty cool, huh? I mean, I was pretty blown away by that entire performance. And we've got a concert at Moods tonight, so we got a lot of other cool things coming up. Who here went to a couple labs yesterday? Very good. Who signed up for labs today? Good. If you have not, I did see a few hands not go up. Please do go to checkout. You have another chance this afternoon. Folks, we're going to start off today to talk a little bit about the automotive industry. We had the founder of Tesla here on Wednesday, but we're here to talk a little bit about AI and automotive, and specifically about what does it do on the production side and different things. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Barbara Sigler from Volkswagen.
Also from my side, I'm very happy and also excited to be here today. My name is Barbara. I'm talking a little bit about AI and automotive, more on the internal side, and share a few learnings that we've had at Volkswagen Group around that. Now, I have three main topics I want to talk about. First is, what is AI? Because I realize people sometimes do not really know. There's a big hype around it, but what is it? Then second, what do we do with it? Giving a little bit of insight there. And the third part, what have we learned and how did we do it? What is AI? It's one of the biggest hypes in the technology industry at the moment, I believe. So AI is really the objective of reaching a super intelligence at one point. So we have had a definition here about a biological intelligence that we're trying to achieve. Now there's a lot of talk about supercomputers, super intelligence. How do we get there? We get there applying machine learning. Machine learning is basically algorithms that you apply to learn from a massive amount of data. This is actually driving AI. You have data sets, you apply intelligent algorithms there, and you learn from it, you predict from it. So this is why we rather talk at Volkswagen about machine learning than about AI. We want to get away from the big hype, but really get down to achieving value add through this new technology. Now, what do you need to do? You need to collect your data, you need to store it centrally, you use powerful hardware. Some of you might have come across the term of GPUs. It's basically coming from the gaming industry, very powerful graphical cards that can now be used also on the B2B side to process the data and the algorithms. And then, of course, you need smart people who develop algorithms, formulas that analyze your data in simple terms. So this is how you achieve insight from your data. And this is what AI is ultimately about. Now, why is AI has been out there, or machine learning, for a long time, for at least 20, 30 years. So this morning I talked to a colleague here saying, well, even in the 60s there was some talk about tomorrow we'll have the big AI thing and the super intelligence. Well, we have 2017 now, and we still don't have that massive super intelligence. We're still working towards it, but why it's getting such a hype is we have a massive amount of data. You know, a couple of years ago we did talk a lot about Internet of Things, about devices that connect to the internet. Today, this is, for example, one of our cars. And with all these devices connecting to the internet, you can collect the data therefrom. So you have huge amounts of data. I did touch a little bit about the computing performance already, about GPUs. So you have the Moore's law. some of you might be familiar with. So you have the power of computers growing every 2 years, doubling basically. And then what is also, so these factors are really driving the development. And what is quite new is also the open source approach. I've been, if you study my CV, I've been in IT for 10 years. But what is really new for me is that algorithms are open source today. So these are being shared. So the tricky part here is really, of course, the infrastructure bit, getting that set up, but also collecting your data in the right way, process it, and get it ready for use. So for example, on open source, Baidu in China is one of the biggest companies applying AI across various industries, from payment, social media interaction, and so forth. And even they share very openly the insights they gain and the algorithms they gain, so the community can learn from it. So that's pretty impressive, I think. So these are really the three main drivers there. Now coming to the question, what can you do with it? Just to start it very simply, AI is basically in everybody's life already today. Most famous one is Google. When you use a Google search, for example, if you want to look for what is AI, you get an impressive millions of hits in the web. Now, if you imagine you have to do a manual analysis on this, impossible. So you need machines to do that for you, to rank it by importance and relevance to you. Also, computers learn today from there. So this is just one simple application. Another very powerful area is, the ones of you using Apple platform, is Siri. Siri is actually recognizing your voice and also speech recognition and text recognition. It's a very powerful tool for the future, that you don't have to manually type while you're busy with other things, but you just talk to a machine. And this is of course the same as for Google Now or from Alexa from Amazon, you might have come across. Now, coming towards Volkswagen Group, why is AI important to us? Of course, the first thing you're going to think about is, when you hear about a car manufacturer, is autonomous driving. Obviously, this is one of the most important areas and key areas from us. Some of you might have followed the automotive show in Frankfurt, IAA, these days, where Audi just did a massive announcement the past 2 days on their AI program and how they're going to develop products and services. So this is publicly quite known. But I want to venture off with you in an area that is not so publicly known, how we apply AI inside Volkswagen and why. Now, one is of course digital services and products across all sorts, in the car, outside the car. And the second area is the smart enterprise area. We are going to show you in a minute a few use cases. The idea there is to optimize and maybe in the future even automate processes. There is huge power there, huge potential there. So across the entire value chain, we do a lot of things there. So from technical development, production, procurement, you might be familiar with it. It's a very standard value chain. You can apply AI or machine learning in various sorts. Now let me introduce 3 concrete examples of what we do with AI. First one being the virtual sales planner. Can you imagine we have a car program of 50 to 100 different models and variations you can basically put accessories into your car. You can imagine if you have to plan that centrally for a market, the complexity is so huge. You cannot even manually plan for all the possible combinations. But still you have to make a very wise decision, because once you plan your sales, these cars will sit on your stock. So it will bind capital in your company. And what we have done with one of our first test markets is actually analyze 4 million configurations of our customers and 300,000 car orders to come up with the ideal configuration of a car. And that is a quite powerful tool, but that we were able to realize quite a few savings and also optimizations to help make the sales planner's life easier. That is what it is about. Another area is the all-time parts prognosis. Now Volkswagen has some 90 million cars in the car park for our customers, and as an OEM, we have to service these cars for 15 years. So you can imagine planning the right parts in the right amount for the right markets and the right warehouse in time is a huge challenge. Now what we've done with AI is we've analyzed the 450,000 parts that we have, the possible combination for the 15 years of the lifespan by looking at past data. What did customers buy? How much of them and where and what car models are available in which market? And by that analysis we were able to optimize again our stock and also optimize the delivery time for our customers. Coming to a bit outlook to the future. Now, optimizing traffic flows in cities is of course one of the biggest topics for an automotive OEM. We've started here a future, I must say, research program. What we did here is we took test data from taxis in Beijing, because you see on the left, the taxis traditionally on the way from the city center to the airport, there was a lot of traffic jam traditionally, and still is. Now what we did is we took a quantum computer. Now you might have come across that quantum computers is a new way of hardware that is deemed to be more powerful than traditional GPUs or CPUs. It's still in the test and research phase there. So we partnered up there with D-Wave. It's a Canadian startup where we've used their hardware, took the data from Beijing and applied our algorithms. And what we did is we developed basically individual routings for the cars. Now, ideally, you start recognizing first what is the traffic pattern behind. How do people move in the city? Where is the likelihood of congestions the biggest? Then, once you start in the middle of predicting, congestions are likely to happen here or there, over the next 40 minutes, for example, you take that data and try to optimize it with individual routings. So the customers, or in that case taxis, can seamlessly venture and reach their goals and destinations. This is still, must say, in the test phase, but you can imagine for the future this has enormous potential, basically because this is a big problem in the biggest cities in the world. So Google has done a lot of work there, of course, and we as a car manufacturer come in with our car data, with our intelligence, and try to make people's life really better there. Now, what have we learned and how did we get there? We have founded in 2013 a team called Data Lab Munich. This is also the team where I'm based at, because in 2013 we've recognized data is going to be a big thing. At that time we've referred to as big data, and we realized we can't really, in traditional IT structures, we struggle to set that structure up that we need to develop these innovative things. So a decision has been taken to found in Munich, far away from the headquarters actually, a competence team, at that time still a startup with 4 people, that started investigating that area. So that was pretty exciting. You might ask, why Munich? Well, in Munich there's 2 big universities, the LMU and the TU Munich. TU Munich, by the way, just won recently an award in a challenge with Elon Musk around Hyperloop. Not sure if you've come across it, pretty exciting there. So you see there is really big talent in town. So, and this is what we see as well when we hire and grow the team, that this talent is really wanting to stay in the city, stay in that environment. In simple terms, and excuse me for the Wolfsburg colleagues, to Wolfsburg, in the middle of nowhere, we can't get that talent. So this is why we are based in Munich. What has been done so far is we've developed more than 100 use cases, some examples you've just seen, up to the stage of a prototype. Now this is really important. We started off as a prototyping test company, basically, or testing, not as a test company, sorry, but really as a team testing the concepts and venturing off and even acting as evangelists within the company. Because you can imagine a couple of years ago, no one really had big knowledge around data. At that time we did talk about business intelligence, but not yet really applying algorithms strategically to a big amount of data. So that is also important. Now we are at the stage 4 years later to really move things into production, into serious use, which is a challenge in many things. I mean, we're called a lab, so this is an area we spend a lot of time and effort on. Now, what has been achieved, and this is really amazing, you have millions of savings. We've had here $200 million in saving that we have discovered across the value chain, and we're still not at the top. So there is still a lot more potential and not a lot more to achieve, and it's a pretty amazing number. Now, we have at the moment 50 team members with a very diverse and international background. We talk in a minute a little bit more about talent, which is the scarcest resource in that topic. And we're still growing because we figure out we have a lot more requests for our support than we can actually help people with. Now, the background of our team is analytics, machine learning, which means we have people who study mathematics, informatics, even physicians, which is a very broad area, and also business people, of course, who work a little bit with the business on where to discover the data potential. At the bottom, you will notice I talked about Volkswagen. You might know, just to spend 30 seconds on this, we are a big, big group. We have 13 brands. The brand newest one is Moja, around mobility services. And the team in Munich is really set out to service all these companies. That's also a very important aspect to really share what is being developed centrally with all the team members. Now, how did we get there? I did talk about 2013, where it was founded. Our focus was then really applying advanced analytics in various use cases. We are now focusing on applying AI, so we're starting that within this year, and really building, as I just mentioned, not only prototypes, but using that long-term and sustainably across our value chain. And what we see coming, and this is really a bit of a bet into the future, is autonomous systems. Now, what do we understand as autonomous systems? It's basically still systems that are set out to support our team members and employees in Volkswagen to do their job. Let me just outline one more example there. In the logistics area, you can imagine monitoring the supply chain for 120 factories worldwide is a big challenge. And we're producing about 10 million cars a year, so you can imagine the supplier network behind there is very complex and very international. And doing that monitoring, even per brand centrally, is very, very complex. So there we can apply intelligent algorithms, integrate data, and then monitor what is going on in our supplier network. For example, you remember perhaps the earthquake in Fukushima in Japan a couple of years ago. It is far away from Europe, far away from our headquarters, but even then, when the first predictions were coming that an earthquake will happen, first alarms were going on saying, guys, there might be a problem in your supply chain, and at the end of the day, the impact was there. There were some colorings produced close to Fukushima that we just couldn't get delivered because the factories were destroyed at that time. So it just gives you a little bit of flavor of the complexity we have there and the potential also we have there. If there's a system that automatically alerts you as a logistics expert saying, oh, there's something coming up. The same applies if you integrate weather data, for example. What happened just recently in the south of the US, where we also have a factory close there, it's a massive impact also to your supply chain again. So that's just another example where we see the future going. Now, what I'm actually very proud of, that we have built in Munich a very interesting ecosystem. We have talked about the team members we have on site, very skilled. We have, since last October, we are very proud of a fundamental research group. Now you might ask, why is Volkswagen having their own fundamental research group? Reason there is, things are getting so complex and we want to make sure we are not only applying what others developed, but we are contributing to this community as well. I've talked to you before about sharing what has been developed, about open source. This is what this group of currently 10 people with Professor van der Smaak from TU Munich does. They're investigating time and effort to advance the algorithms that are there for deep learning, reinforcement learning, you name it. Very complex topics. And we give that back to the community. So suddenly we are part of a bigger community and a bigger round of experts in machine learning AI, which is then in turn very valuable for us because we learn, of course, also from these colleagues. Another aspect I'm quite happy to have is the startup collaboration space. We're at the moment still having the application phase for our AI incubation space running. So if you have good AI solutions and if you're a startup, please apply for our startup collaboration space. It's running until tonight. And what we will give you back in turn is actually a free office space, a funding of 30,000 euros for 3 months, and concrete contacts and integration into Volkswagen Group. And last but not least, of course, our ecosystem on site. We have the research group, we have the mentoring experts from our team, and as a matter of fact, also the autonomous driving technology group is located in our building. So that's what we give here within Volkswagen. And another aspect is, of course, the tech scene in Munich with universities, partners. For example, IBM, we're partnering with them in various aspects where the Worldwide IoT Center is located quite close to our office. So this is why Munich is very attractive already and becoming even more attractive for the future as more and more technology startups and companies are settling there. I did mention before the team. So we are driving, obviously, the digital transformation of Volkswagen, all concerning data topics. We have a team of 15 nationalities, or more than 15 nationalities. More than 20 different languages are spoken, main language being English, which is for a German company quite a move, as you can imagine. It starts with simple things like our working contracts are just in German, and then you have suddenly a team member coming on board who doesn't understand German. So we did push our colleagues in Wolfsburg a lot to kind of transform as well. And this is in a way also a bit the role of this data lab in Munich, to act as evangelists, as I mentioned before, on data, but also on new ways of working. Because you imagine agile development in the terms of data is a lot faster, a lot more flexible than the standard corporate IT that we have. So this is a very interesting and at the same time challenging task for us, where I get very excited about to transform also our traditional IT colleagues. Now, let me come back to the talent. Diversity is very important to us because, as research also documents, it fosters a climate of innovation. I can openly share with you, I've been, just mentioned it, a couple of years in IT, also holding people management responsibilities. Now, the guys we have here in the team are extremely challenging. Now, if you take a decision on something, they really want to know why you're taking that decision, and they want to make sure you take the best decision for everyone in the team. Now, that can sometimes be a bit tiresome, but on the other hand, it's exactly what I'm trying to say here. It creates innovation because it makes you think differently. And the guys and the girls on the team force you to think differently. And this is what I've found very exciting and also enriching for myself, for my personal development, even as their people manager. It's a different climate, really. And the unique ecosystem is very important also to our team members. Why? Because there is extreme scarcity of talent. So if you're looking into investigating into data solutions, the first and foremost thing is figure out a way to get talented people. Headhunters are all over the place. I mean, platforms like LinkedIn and so forth are just fostering that development. But this is really one of the key learnings. Attract talent and figure out a way to keep them. And one of our answers is, amongst others, we have that ecosystem that allows them not to lose their skill while they're with us, but to grow while they're with us. You remember the startups contribute, the research group contributes, and also the colleagues amongst each other, because that background is so diverse, contributes there. So this is one of the key lessons you'll see later on in my summary as well. Talent is the key. How do we work? I think you might be familiar with it. The only thing here is AI research, fundamental research I've talked a little bit about. They help us really to apply their newest insights to what is being done in the applied side. So if you want to do a project with us, we start with designing your idea. You might have come across design thinking. It's a methodology to kind of structurally break down your ideas into concrete use cases, as we call them. Use cases in terms of a small project with a concrete objective. We do a lot of consulting service there because we realize colleagues across the group are not yet that familiar with data and what to do with them. So the first question we ask is basically, what is that you want to achieve? And the second question is, what data do you have? And then we break it down is what can be done, what are relevant questions. And what is also important to us, we start small and want to discover very fast if an idea is valuable to follow up or not. Because traditionally in IT, some of you from working on SAP projects, you have these massive, big things. What we want to try to do is start small and evolve incrementally there. The second type is prototype. I've mentioned before already, this was our traditional focus until, let's say, end of last year, to come up with solutions very fast up to the level of a prototype. Now, the data lab, we talk about data lab 2.0 or even renaming the lab towards a technology center now, we go into implementation. So our business has sustainable value there and can apply what has been discovered in a prototype for their daily work, basically. We refer here not to AI in the artificial intelligence way, but to augmented intelligence that we apply, which means basically, as I mentioned before, this technology is helping you doing your daily job a bit better and easier. And of course, you have operation there as well, which is done by our colleagues in Wolfsburg mainly, so a lot of know-how transfer is being taken from the decentral team in Munich to the headquarter IT in Wolfsburg. Now, key lessons learned from our side. We did talk about the talent, so this is where I, putting myself into someone's shoes who is just starting off, think about the talent, how to attract, how to keep them. Then second, develop a data strategy. It might sound stupid because obviously you need a strategy, but we figured it's not that easy because some areas do not collect data at all maybe, other areas do collect data but in a wrong way, so figure out conceptually really what you want to do. Then of course the third element, it's about technology. Build up technology platforms, get the right providers on board and implement it for you internally. And fourth, last but not least, it's also about culture. I mean, this summit is about digital transformation, and so it applies here as well. Transformation is not just a technology thing. It's also the readiness of people in their minds to open up, to share, and to discover new things. And these are really the four main things I wanted to bring here today with me, because I think these are the four most relevant insights. Of course, there's a lot more technology aspect we could talk about for hours and hours, but this is actually all I wanted to share with you today in my main speech, and I think now we're open to more specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to open the floor to questions. I mean, how many of you, oh, perfect. Hold on, let me get the cube here. We learned this. We're not going to throw this thing. It's a terrible idea. Here you go.
Good morning. Thanks for the interesting speech. I think I learned a lot. One of the questions also about like data and how you use data was, as I'm driving one of your cars, and I really like that it kind of like already steers automatically without being autopiloted. Do you collect that data, like the performance of that, and do you like work with that? Because I kind of like expect that that it gets better while I'm driving it.
Yes, I mean, not our group in Munich, I have to say. We are involved in some of the motor and assistance systems, but at a very low level. But yes, as far as I know, this data is being collected, and this is exactly what Audi tries to do and figure out with the group to make these assistance systems better and evolve them gradually into an autonomous vehicle.
That's cool.
Yep.
Cool.
Pretty exciting also.
It is. Thanks.
Perfect, cool. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Oh, perfect. One, or just pass it one back. We'll just go row by row, so.
You mentioned the different cultures between Wolfsburg and Munich.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say something how that works when once you start implementing your ideas back into corporate R&D departments? What's your experience there?
Yeah, yes, you're hitting a very critical point in that entire value chain. And I have to say we are very fortunate to work with really kind colleagues who are very open to change. But you hit the point of having a two-speed IT. In the lab we have traditionally a lot of freedom to develop things, and suddenly you hit an IT whose focus is to run stable systems. So of course, a lab from the outside trying to poke the others, saying, guys, you need to move, you need to move. So the way we approach this is start early and involve them very tightly. Because what we've learned also, they are very excited to join us in our projects and to give people from Wolfsburg the opportunity to stay in Munich for a couple of weeks or days in workshops. And really, what is most important is the culture thing, that both sides are open-minded and work towards each other. It's a process, it's evolving, I have to say. Yeah.
Probably a lot of visitors from Wolfsburg the next couple of weeks,
Yes.
right? I take it for meetings.
Yeah, historically, a lot of visitors, because today we have even an organization called Think New organization in Volkswagen, because you might be aware what's going on in our industry is fundamental. Not only the combustion engine is going to change to electric, but people are not buying cars, they're sharing cars. So also the way we do things has to change. Hardware is our greatest strength, and we need to augment that with intelligence and software business. So just to summarize that. And it's a process, it's not done yet, we are right on that journey.
Perfect, thank you. Do we have any other questions? We got time for a handful more questions. Who's working on some, oh, perfect, right here.
Good morning. You were talking about design thinking and how you apply it. Do you use the concept of human-centered design, like IdeoDOS, or how do you organize these workshops, or what is the approach there?
Yep, we do not use that specific method yet, at least not that we know of, let me put it that way. So let's make an example. You have a specific request to do things in after sales with your data. We would come to you basically with our experts, and we would explore what you have there. So you would say, well, my biggest problem is I don't know how many, let's make the spare part thing, how many spare parts I need in a specific warehouse at a certain point in time. Then we would work out what is the experience around it. We would not start with the technology bit, but trying to nail down what is it really that you want to achieve ultimately. Because sometimes it turned even out that the question you initially asked is actually not the relevant one. We're venturing off to a completely different area. So we're discussing there a lot of very business and basic things, and then venturing through the process of applying that, and then only then getting into technology. This is for us in IT a challenge, because usually we started talking about tech before we really figured out what we want to solve. And this is why we really want to start off at this very end.
Perfect, yeah, just pass the cue back there. Get a little volleyball game going.
Very specific question, actually, because what you do seems to be in very high demand, also within the company, within the group. Who sets the priorities? So who will tell you or tell yourself to actually go to that group or that unit to solve the next problem?
Very good question. I mean, I have to say, Data Lab Munich is not the only group in Volkswagen, luckily. I mean, with 50 team members, you can't cover the need of such a big group. So the work from us is being prioritized by us in the group, basically, in Munich. We report directly to the CIO. He's reviewing our progress at least twice a year. The way we prioritize is based on the impact we're making in the business. The money we save, or the impact technology-wise. Like the two areas I've shown before. And there needs to be significant progress to be made. And if not, like scaling solutions is not our primary focus, there's then other groups who will do that.
So people want a lot of coffee with you to like bribe you into set the priorities, right?
Right.
A lot of Oktoberfest visit, I would take.
Yeah, it starts tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. A lot of people coming in. Cool, perfect. We've got for a couple more questions. So, is anybody working on sort of a challenge like that, kind of trying to build out a competence center for AI?
Well, you guys should. Sorry to say that. It doesn't matter which industry you're in.
Well, so let's take that question. So where should they start, right? We got a whole bunch of people who are going to start at an AI competence center later today. So where should they start in their company? I mean, at least if you're looking for a place to kind of talk to kind of an area and be like, this is where we could save something, this is where we could do something.
Yeah,
where would you start?
My recommendation would be get together with your strategy guys and your business development guys and really figure out what is driving your business and where do you have the greatest pain point. Like in the financial industry, I believe, I'm not an expert there, but I believe their customer interface is changing dramatically. They're basically going a similar transformation than we are. Their business model is changing. So I would figure out with the strategy guys, what can we do there? Because physical presence in the future of banking, I don't believe it plays that of a big role as it is today. So figure out what is driving your business, and then figure out as a next step what you can do with data, and where AI or technology overall, I mean, AI is being probably overhyped in many cases, but where technology can help you. And I'm sure data insights will be part of it. I'm sure.
In a lot of ways, the first question I think you'll probably get when you come back here is like, whoa, but this sounds expensive, right? It's like talent, ooh, this could be expensive. Where, when you said, you saved $200 million in terms of what you guys have done in that sense, how directly have you been able to measure that? So if you come back with a slide that's like, hey guys, look, we did these 5 projects and $200 million return to shareholders, I want to grow. And then we're like, absolutely yes. Or how much of that is like, we saved time per car? Like how easy was it for you to kind of define the value that you brought back into that $200 million number?
It's a very big discussion with our controllers.
I would imagine. That's the question.
Because ultimately it comes down to the question, which cost center is gonna get rid of some money? Or where can I take the money away from and where can I put it in? So biggest discussion, the way we do is we let the business people develop the business case. Of course, that's not a discussion we IT people are in. It's driven by the business, and it's amazing the opportunities. I actually didn't believe the numbers when I saw them first. I said, guys, come on, let's keep it low. You don't talk about such a big impact and say, well, if you have it annually and then count it over the years, the impact is huge because we haven't done a lot with our data in the past. And so we are growing that. And yeah, I think there's a lot more to come.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see what you do, especially on the supply chain side as well. I mean, in terms of certain companies like Apple right now, air shipping freights are going out for the new iPhone. You're seeing they've done a cool job at also optimizing their new freight sort of system for that whole thing going forward. Perfect. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Adrian, here we go.
Hello, thank you for your speech. Let's say the ethical question is also a very big question. The whole autonomous, specifically autonomous driving part. Do you also address that in a certain way?
Very good question. It is a very big topic. Once we come into autonomous system, yes. I have to say we have no concept ready and no answer ready for that, but we are following that up at various different levels from strategy side, also technology side. And if you're going to the direction of what Elon Musk is criticizing about the AI hype, that machines can get out of control, I don't see that risk in short term, but in long term definitely we need to think about regulations, because you can do a lot of things with technology as we know, not only with AI but also other things. So the only way to fix that is regulation, and the ethical side, yes, it needs to be addressed definitely. It's on our agenda.
Please, throw it back. There you go.
I have actually 2 questions. The first would be, how come that Volkswagen, as such a huge technology company, sort of realized in 2013, I think that they can use the data that they are collecting every day? And the second part would be, I mean, you're a company of more than 200,000 people, I guess. Are you really the only guys that are having using data within Volkswagen, or there are many more teams that are working on it?
Okay. Let me start with the first one. How did it come about in 2013? It was made, actually, our CIO, Martin Hofmann, together with my predecessor, Conny Schaurecker, the 2 of them were sitting together and thinking like, well, everyone is talking about the big data hype. What are we doing? So they discovered there is no structure to that. So they started with, I think, 3-4 people in the MAN offices downtown Munich to start developing concepts, very small. And this is what I wanted to show with the slide before. It has grown and it will grow in the future for sure. Are we the only ones? No, definitely not. There is quite a few groups, luckily, within Volkswagen. Just to answer the question, we are 600,000 employees worldwide, so huge. We have 120 production facilities. Most of the people, of course, are producing cars today, and in the future, same ratio. We have major groups in the US, downtown San Francisco, We have many more labs, not just the data lab, the smart production lab in Würzburg. In San Francisco, it's the digital lab, developing all sorts of things. In Berlin, we have the ideation hub, digital lab as well. So there's a number of groups across the company, luckily doing that. It would be sad if we were the only ones. Yeah.
Perfect. And I assume there's a lot of collaboration between the groups.
Yes, sorry, I missed that one. Of course, we collaborate very closely. We do projects together. Even across time distances, that works out really well. We have also personnel exchange. So if you build various groups, very important to have similar views. Like one of our CTOs, or our CTO just changed over to the US last year. And we're still maintaining close collaboration. The D-Wave quantum computing project that I've referred to, we do together.
Perfect. Yeah, we got time for another one or two questions.
Thank you. You mentioned that you have some collaboration, you inspiration from also the research area. Do you also share data to this research area?
Very good question. To my knowledge, we don't share that today. We share in open source manner our insights. So algorithms in a database. Because the data is a critical point. I know that some of our competitors like BMW start sharing very openly their data from the connected car space. At Volkswagen, to my knowledge, we are not yet there. And I can't really answer if this is our strategy really long term.
Okay, this is the hardest part for research, to get this data to.
We know.
Okay.
We know. I had one point technically up there earlier around data. So we do not only collect data, but we also produce data in a way, mechanically. So this is how the research, and we also use public data, of course, that for example, for the D-Wave example on routing. So this is how the group operates, basically.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we have time for one more question, if anybody would like to ask the last question. Oh, there you go. Just one down.
Okay, totally different question. How do you see your company Volkswagen in comparison to other companies in the market? I mean, for example, there's Tesla, which is also very hyped, right? And so, are you on the front, or do you see yourself like running behind a little? I hope for an honest answer.
That's a tough question. That's a tough question.
Yeah, let me take it from that side. I personally have high respect for Elon Musk as an entrepreneur. What he is doing with automotive is amazing, but also in other areas, really high respect. Honestly, I don't have a clear view if we are behind or not behind. I know we have a great strength in hardware that now needs to be extended to the software world. And this is where we are at. Basically, we are not the top leaders, I don't think so, but we're making good progress, let me put it that way. And I'm very confident with the talent we have on board, we definitely be part of the mobility future. I have no doubt about that.
It's with 600,000 employees, you're forwards in some parts, probably a little behind in others.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. Ladies, I just want to say thank you very much for being up here. Thank you for taking so many questions. And we have a little something for you there. We got your stylish bag ready for Oktoberfest.
Wow.
It's not blue, but
That's cool.
That's what the headset's for.
Wonderful.
So thank you very much.
Thank you so
for
much.
being here today, and thank you. And if you could be around afterwards.
Yeah,
to answer
sure,
your questions.
definitely.
Around there. Perfect. Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for
Ladies and
having
gentlemen, round of applause. Folks, we're moving on from the car space. We've done cars. We've done cars this festival. We've done cars. So next, we're moving on to somebody who's done a lot of pinning, over at Pinterest. He was the CTO at Reddit, and I just found out that he was actually the boss of one of my good friends from high school. So, small world, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marty Wiener. Thank you.
Scary to see myself that big. Hello, how's it going? I'm super excited to be here. It's been 16 years since I've been in Switzerland, and I love the architecture. We don't have things that are from 1300 in the US. We didn't have a country back then. So I love exploring the architecture out here. One thing I'm a little nervous about is whenever I'm in a new country is will my jokes translate? So we'll have to see if I'm funny over here. In Japan it seemed to work. In China nobody laughed. So, damn it. So anyway, today I'd like to talk about building culture. And I'm always hesitant to put the word culture when I'm building, when I'm going to give a talk, because people don't want to come and listen to culture, so I kind of have to trick you. So I think my title must have changed between now and then, but I've now tricked you into listening to me about culture. I was a founding engineer at Pinterest, and I was a first CTO at Reddit, and now I'm off on sabbatical land attempting to write a book. Attempt being the key word there. I'm trying. But throughout this time, I learned a lot about building companies, and I learned that building a startup is very, very hard. And I'd like to make it less hard, which is sort of why I'm writing this book. It's about building companies from zero to IPO. And this is one portion of all of that. So what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about how companies grow, and then that'll set the context for some of the discussions I want to teach you that I've learned about culture. This is Instagram. Instagram's growth. That's the y-axis is millions of users, and on the horizontal is time. Interestingly, the Pinterest graph looked exactly the same. They were always almost exactly like 2 months ahead of us. It was a strange, bizarre thing that we were sister companies kind of growing up together. And the way companies evolve is, in the beginning, you're developing an idea. This is usually when the founder is supposed to be paying attention to calculus, right, what they're drawing. And then you launch, exciting, and then nothing happens. At Pinterest, we used to, the founder said that we were in stealth mode, but not because we wanted to be. That was sad. And then something happens. People are coming. We're not really certain why, but they're coming. And then this is when you become a big successful business. That traction time is interesting. So what I'd like to describe to you now is what the emotion is throughout that phase. This, to me, is pure creation bliss. These days, with Amazon, with GCP, and all these things, I can make an app, and I can make a backend, and I can deploy it out to the universe with maybe one engineer now. It used to maybe require 2. I think I could do it on 1, maybe even half, while I'm watching movies. This is also bliss. You get a couple friends together, you're getting ready for launch. It's pure creation. It's so cool. This is hell. Because this is when you have launched your product and nobody gives a shit. This is really, can be a really hard time. And look at this time frame too. Pinterest is about the same. That's 9 months. And you're sitting there wondering, should I pivot? And I guarantee someone here is going to ask me afterward, tell me about when I should pivot. And that's the billion-dollar question. I'm starting to put together a few things to hint toward it, but if I knew the answer, I'd be far richer than I am right now. This is a different hell with more hackers. Usually at this point, you have accrued a couple of employees who, they're okay, they're not great, it's about who you could get, and you're not sleeping anymore. You found success, but now you can't sleep. And normally these friends who you had so much fun with, now they're your mortal enemies, so you hate everything, but you gotta keep going. And now this is hard. This is when usually the phase of the company where you've figured it out, you're getting your management working, things are starting to sort out, and it's getting better, but it's still really hard. And this is when you realize you don't know what the hell you're doing. And now the healing can begin. And this is when you get to a maturing engineering org like Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook and these other companies are. So my objective is to get you to anybody who's in this position to hear faster and through it smoother. The way I describe these phases is this is adolescence, it's pure fun, it's okay, you can do whatever you want, you can't really break things. And it's these awkward teenage years where your voice is cracking and it's just really awkward because you don't really have things figured out. It's a weird phase. This is the phase I'd like to focus on because, and I have to do this in one breath for funniness, you have found a path to success. Somebody cares, you've got traction, but your app is breaking all the time, your tech debt is mounting, you have no HR support staff, you need funding, you need to build a product, your lead engineer is an asshole, and you have to fire the next engineer who can't code, hiring is difficult, and you have 15 engineers and growing, and whatever systems and processes you had previously, they're not working anymore. This sucks. This was pretty much, Pinterest at a certain phase and Reddit when I joined. So there's a lot here. I can't do it all, sadly. I'd like to, but brace yourself, traction has come. Do you have Game of Thrones here? Does this translate? Okay, good. All right. I only have 30 minutes, actually less now since I just spent about 5 minutes talking about it. But so what I've done is I've got a lot of topics I would like to cover. I've whittled it down to 2 that I think are the most critical because they're not discussed enough. And they're about this concept I've sort of developed that's an aggregation of other concepts that others have developed called debts. I'm going to describe what I call 5 debts, and there's actually a few more. And those debts in any corporate structure will lead into my discussion about a deeper understanding of culture, where I'm trying to give more framework to how we discuss culture. So let's do it. So the 5 debts I'm going to talk about today are pretty much what I experienced when I joined Reddit, and what we had to work on to get Reddit into fast-moving pace. This is about 2015. The company had gone through some interesting different phases, but I was basically brought in to make the company, as I jokingly call it, a boring, normal Silicon Valley company. No more excitement. Make it fast-moving. Make the excitement on the good end, not the crazy end. It's about building a really fast-moving engineering org that just can pump out great products all the time. So I'm going to go through 5 here. There's corporate debt that we had to deal with, brand debt, technical debt, management debt, and culture debt. And there's 3 other debts that I defined when I first joined Reddit that helped me sort of break down this big problem. But I'm not going to go into them as much. There's, of course, actual debt, right? I guess I need a different symbol than dollars. But anyway, there's product debt. That's another big problem that companies take on. And there's home debt. Meaning, usually, if you're working your butt off on these startups, your home suffers, and that's honestly what I'm doing right now. I'm on sabbatical with kids. The thing about debt in a startup is it's okay to have debt. In fact, you should have debt, because in the beginning of a company, you shouldn't be worrying about insurance forms. You as a founder should be worrying about your product, and if you are worrying about insurance forms, you're probably doing the wrong thing. So as you build the company, you should accrue debt, and then you have to figure out the right time and place to pay it down, and that's pretty much how every company acts after they get past traction. They've accrued a lot of debt, and now it's time to fix it. So corporate debt. I think this is a good mix of engineers. The thing that a lot of engineers forget is that you're not engineering in a vacuum. You've got to have all these other support structures in a company. So this is debt affecting the operations of the business. This is where, for instance, contracts are not being written well. For a while, you've just been kind of writing them on napkins or something. That's got to be fixed, because that's not optimal. That's not legally copacetic. So that's why you hire in business development, procurement. Common HR functions tend to get neglected. That's something, especially in small startups, if you're working in HR, you're probably doing the right thing. But at some point, you need to start making sure that your company is happy and healthy. Financial, you need to be tracking it, you need to be modeling it, and legal is another common one. These are some examples of what I describe as corporate debt. And these are all things that typically are accrued by the time you get to traction. And the reason why this is so core is that it is the very middle of your company. Your engineers cannot be creative and focus on the next big thing if they're worrying about, if their paycheck's going to come in, because finance doesn't have their stuff together. So this is one portion of it. It's something that we had to work on at Reddit. The way we did this, honestly, is we hired some really great executives, and we said, go make it happen, and they made it happen. Brand's another one that companies tend to accrue. This is debt affecting the perception of the company. Every company tends to have this, especially startups. One example of this kind of debt is negative or the incorrect perception. Incorrect meaning that you want everybody to believe in your company in this way, and they think of it this way. Another one is lack of awareness. In the early days of Pinterest, nobody knew what Pinterest was. I'd go to them and they'd be like, Pinterest? And that was, that has major ramifications. Some of them are, obviously, user growth. This is why you hire a marketing team, so people know who you are. Monetization, your ads people need to be, that brand needs to be managed as well. This is something that we've been working on at Reddit and making a lot of progress. The ability to pivot a product. If everybody believes your product is X, Y, and Z, and you want to start moving it, this could be exceptionally hard. And hiring. This is one you may not think about, but if you're a CTO or a VP of engineering, you better be a brand person, because you cannot hire. In those early days of Pinterest, I'd go to senior engineers and they'd be like, who are you? I don't care. Now Pinterest could hire anybody they want. But we had to work on engineering brand as well as corporate brand and everything else. So it really impacts your hiring. Classic thing is you'll find with startups, when I advise them, they can't get an Android engineer. Which, by the way, if there's any Android engineers, please talk to me. I need some Android engineers. But it's really hard to get these engineers, especially if it's a small startup, because you've got to convince them in this amazing thing that your startup's going to do, and that's hard to do. Especially when you've got companies like Facebook and Google offering very big amounts of money. Technical debt. I'm assuming everybody in here kind of understands technical debt, but I'd like to hone it just a little bit more on what my definition of it is, and that's debt affecting the ability for engineering to deploy sufficiently bug-free and performance systems. What I mean by that is I don't care if there's crap code over here as long as it doesn't affect my ability to push out new ideas. That's all that matters to me. As an engineering manager, my job is to make the assembly line build stuff as fast as possible and stuff that works. So examples, I'm sure this crowd knows this really well, but for instance, common one you see at startups is too many engineers committing to one source repo. This is why we have microservices as a concept, so that everybody has their own piece of the pie. Reddit, that was one of the first things I started working on. They had a monolithic code base, everything in one spot. If everybody's working on that, that's 300, if you get up to 300 engineers, that's 300 engineers touching the same code, breaking it all in unison, which is a beautiful thing. Not really. Insufficient testing methodology. This is another thing that I faced. This makes it hard for your engineers to confidently push more stuff out. It usually means that you have to pull back. So this makes everything fragile. Poor peer review. Actually, Reddit had really good stuff. This is something we had to develop at Pinterest. And this is about making sure that there's a good wisdom sharing and that your code is actually decent. Difficult deploy system, bad code, and what that can lead into is, bad code leads into a lot of problems. And then there's poor performance. If you have poor performance and you got to deploy the thing, this is a common problem that companies that are scaling past their ability to keep up with the performance. And what this can affect is, again, back to the core purpose of what I believe engineering is, which is the ability to turn around product ideas, to make whatever idea they have reality quickly. And it also hampers your ability to onboard new engineers. If I want to get in some contractors and I want to bring in 10 and I want to accelerate everything and it takes them 4 weeks to get used to the code, I spent 4 weeks worth of contract work and I'm 4 weeks behind. They should be able to get in and be active in maybe a couple of days, depending on the product, obviously. Management debt. This was a term coined, I think, by Joanne Bradford and Ben Horowitz around what happens when you neglect management. There was this experiment that Silicon Valley tried. I don't know how wide-reaching it got, but there was the no management thing. Wouldn't that be an amazing utopia? Until you realize, oh wait, managers do things. They're not just jackasses who tell you not to do things. And so this kind of hit Silicon Valley, and now it's kind of a joke that this was done before. This is debt affecting effective operations of an engineering team. What you're really talking about is you've got all these people and you want them to work well together. And you can have these great ideas that maybe if I just let them all go, it'll all work, and it ain't gonna happen. So examples of this. I remember one day at Pinterest, we had a person come in and they had a couple people draw the organization chart, and there were about 10 different opinions. And so this commonly results in, you have your operations, and you have infrastructure, you have product teams, and you have the user. Well, you want them to all flow super smoothly all the way up so that nobody ever knows that they're depending on anybody. And so if you don't have an org structure that's targeted at your customer, you're usually leaving a lot on the table or you're just not functioning. Another common one you see with a lot of startups or younger teams is the mission, the vision, the values, and especially the prioritization are not well defined. This is commonly because management's not doing their job. Planning and execution are not smooth. What I love in a good, smooth running universe is you've got maybe like a weekly cadence, and every week you keep pushing everything forward. Everything's organized, and it just works in such a way that your engineers don't have to care about all that crap that the managers do. They just get to code and do beautiful stuff. And if you don't have all that, usually it impacts your engineers' ability to have fun making code. And very pronounced is your communication lines usually break down. And now you have fighting between teams, you have mistrust, and I'll get into that in a little bit more. And also there's the individual engineers. Lack of management generally means that those engineers are not getting the attention they need. I don't know if you've all had this experience where you have one manager with 30 directs and you're like, it'll be fine. No, those engineers are getting no attention, and there's probably one that's making the rest miserable, and it starts to blow up from there. And these are all things that you can classify as management debt as you're trying to piece apart your company and understand where your problems are. It affects happiness and growth of your engineers. It affects trust, and it affects the ability to predictably build something and get it out, because you need all these engineers working in cadence to get something out when you say you want to get it out. Culture. Okay, so let's talk about culture. Culture was interesting when I started to tackle it at Pinterest. I basically was told, hey, go figure out culture. And I was like, oh, okay, well, what the hell is culture? So I realized that in Silicon Valley, I don't know about out here, but there was no good way of even talking about culture. It was this buzzword. People like to talk about it, but yeah, we have a good culture. We believe in culture. Well, what is culture? So I did this experiment, and I talked to a bunch of people, and I asked them the same question, what's your company name? I talked to people at LinkedIn, Amazon, Pinterest, Facebook, Reddit, just anybody I could get my hands on. I asked them, tell me about your culture. And the way they would talk about it was in these ways. We're a secretive culture. You can think of like Apple keeps their stuff really tight, right? Versus transparent. This is a little bit more like Reddit is. Just everything is open. Warm and friendly versus direct and painfully honest. That's another common one. Warm and friendly would be like what I think Facebook and Pinterest describe themselves. Direct and painfully honest is what Amazon describes themselves. And what's fascinating about all of these is that they all work for that company, which is great. I think that's one major important portion of the culture, but what's missing that people don't describe is what I think is a more common thing. What is necessary for building a company? So that I can go inside a company and say, is it good or not? So I kind of wanted to piece that together, and this is the framework I came up with. Actually, let me give you the precursor to that framework. Have you heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Is this sort of well known? Okay, so I don't need to, I'll describe it just briefly. This is created by Abraham Maslow in like 43 or something as a way of looking at what successful individuals, what they're made up of, what they're like. What we're talking about at the top is self-actualization, which is kind of a weird term for basically being all you can be. So if you want to be the best poet out there, you can be that. If you want to be the best doctor, best lawyer, if you want status, or if you want money, how do these people achieve it? And then there's these layers below it that lead into it. And the argument being that if you're missing these layers, it doesn't mean you can't achieve those things. It's just a hell of a lot harder. So things like esteem, belonging, and very critically is safety. This to me is about, will tomorrow be okay? So in places like where there's, in Florida right now with the hurricanes, you may not have a house. Actually, that even gets into physiological. But you need to trust that tomorrow will be okay. And in the physiological, that's where we're talking about things like food and shelter. And what I'm curious about is, how do these, if you don't have these, how does it ripple up through the rest of the system, right? Safety, by the way, this is where trauma victims tend to lie. Something will have happened in their life. The rug is now pulled out from under their feet, and they don't trust certain areas, and it ripples up in interesting ways. And that's how you can help trauma victims. So I took this and I basically mapped it to companies where your self-actualization, this is what the company is all about, what they're going to achieve for the rest of the time. It's their mission, right? The values, that's that part I talked about where it's warm and friendly, or it's direct. Whatever those values are higher up. They're what make that company uniquely that company. And below that, I've come up with this layer that is a little bit, I didn't want to name the layer. I tried to name the layer, but then I realized it got too damn complicated. So I'll just tell you what's in it. I believe these are 4 things that are critical for every single company. I don't believe that there's any of these that you can sacrifice. And I'll go into each one of these: trust, respect, motivation, and competence. The competence piece, I'm not going to go into as much. It's basically, if you want to achieve your mission, maybe your mission is to build rockets, and you don't have rocket engineers, you're going to have a hard time. So I'm not going to go into competence, but I'll go into trust, respect, and motivation because they're a little more nebulous, right? And then below that, you also have safety. And there's a lot into safety. We'll go into that. I'm not going to go into physiological, but you can believe that physiological would have an impact. If you're in an area that's poor and people are not eating and your company can't support them, that's a problem. Or if you're in a hurricane area and people don't have shelter, it's going to ripple up the whole chain from the bottom layer, which is really difficult. I'm not going to go into so much because I haven't studied it, because in Silicon Valley we haven't had these problems, but it's a fascinating area. Safety. Let me talk about safety. This is the bottommost layer that I'm going to consider, so it is absolutely critical, and I'll talk to you how I dealt with it at Reddit and Pinterest and how other companies deal with it. Do people feel tomorrow will be okay? And there's a couple ways this can come out. Discomfort about funding is extremely common in startups where the funding might run out. So this is also, you see this a lot in the movie industry these days. They make a giant movie and then they have to promptly shut down because they just used all their money. So how does this ripple across your org? And I'll get into how you fix that. Discomfort about the company trajectory. Do people like where it's going? Do they believe in it? This can be a major problem. Discomfort about job security. There was this one startup I won't name, but they eventually died. And I think it was at least partially because if you read about the CEO and read about what people talked about, he was a jerk. He would jokingly tell people, only he said it was joking. I don't believe he actually was joking. I'm going to fire you. And that goes right to the core of people's safety. They got kids at home. They got a mortgage. You're going right. So they may laugh it off and then be actually terrified. And how is that going to ripple up? The core tenet I've thought about here is that if you don't have safety, no matter how good your values are, no matter how well stated they are, they're going to mess it up. Discomfort about physical and emotional safety. You're seeing a lot of this come out right now. I won't name the companies. You might imagine them. They've been in the news around things like sexual harassment. This goes right to the core of safety for a major portion of your population, which is really bad. Anger is another common one that we have to deal with, and this goes to, make people just not want to come into work. It makes them uncomfortable to be in work. That's really messed up. So how do we fix this? The top one, transparency. This is one way you can address funding issues. I've seen companies weather these storms pretty well by the CEO being absolutely transparent. We're running out of money, here's what we're doing about it, here's what I'd like to do, and here's where things will go. The reason this is so critical is because safety lies deep with the territory of why, the belief system. And humans are really good. If they don't know the why, they make up the why. They don't even know they're doing it. They just make up the why. And oftentimes they assume the worst. So if you tell them, you're transparent with them, it may be that it's an unsafe environment. They may lose their job because funding runs out, but at least they know all the details. And they know that you're working on it, you care about it. Yep. Painting a clear picture of goals and vision. This can really help out because a lot of times safety comes down to a now. It's a very visceral today thing, right? I'm terrified about tomorrow. If you set a vision and you talk to them about, a year down the road or 2 years down the road, this is very useful for the human brain because they can say, well, today sucks, but I see where we're going. And I did this, we did this at Reddit, and I think it was one of the things that helped a lot to clear up safety issues. Being open and honest with people about careers and status. This is very critical so they know they don't have to fill in the mental workflow about if their manager likes them, which people will assume their manager hates them very often. Firing people who undermine safety. This is something I had to deal with a couple times. Here's the deal with safety. It's two-sided, right? You've got the people making unsafe environments, and then you've got the people who feel unsafe. Even when you fire them, it's still in the walls. Like whatever was bothering them at whatever company, I've seen this in many different companies, you fire the person who's causing an unsafe environment, and people still feel it for months, even up to a year. And sometimes you just lose those people, sadly, because they just can't get their head around it. The walls have memory, right? So that's why I've told people, you've got to understand who is causing safety issues, got to get them out of there fast, or see if you can resolve it like now. And that's why it's so critical, because it's, again, at the bottommost layer. And then also building an inclusive environment. Anybody who is not in the majority of your company is just not going to feel safe if there's nobody who's like them. It's just a natural human thing. So I'd like to reiterate, fix safety first, fix it fast. So at various companies I've helped advise, we identified a safety issue. That's the first thing you go after, and you fix it fast, and then you're going to spend about 6 months dealing with the rest of the ramifications of whatever safety issue there was, and you work hard on it. And if this is an issue you're dealing with, come talk to me. I've done a bit of it. Next one, respect. I'm sorry to use the word in the definition of it, but respect is a funny thing, and it's culturally dependent. It's basically, do people feel respected, and are they respecting others? This is a bit about boundaries, and sometimes boundaries are assumed. For instance, is a handshake okay? That's an interesting thing around respect. So what's important in a company is you define what respect means, and a lot of companies define that around it differs by company. One I love to talk about because it's so fascinating is Amazon, extremely successful company, and they're very direct. One engineer told me what you do in Amazon is you go up to somebody and say, you screwed this up and here's how. That's normal. And so that's the respectful communication. You kind of have to get used to it. At other companies, it's more warm and friendly. But it works for them. That's what's so fascinating about it. Respect is often eroded by assholes. And by the way, if someone shows me some kind of data that says hiring an asshole gives you 30% uplift in impact and ability, let me know, because I've not seen that data. There's a big trend happening right now. I kind of call it the no asshole revolution. Some companies, if you're familiar with Slack, it's a very common chat program, especially in enterprise in Silicon Valley, and they have this really fascinating thing they call the no asshole rule. If you're an asshole twice, you're out. It's as simple as that, and I think that's very interesting. I think it helps people understand what's okay. It's weird. Why are people jerks in the workplace? Leave it somewhere else. And miscommunication. This is extremely common, and this is one I work a lot on with companies. A lot of times, there's just miscommunication. I wish I could have shown it to you. I have a whole deck on communication because you have to teach engineers about communication. Because the weird thing is, we're not, at least in the US, we're not taught about how emotions work. In school, you're taught academics. We're never taught about our own brains. And so that's missing. It's something we're doing with our own kids to teach them how your brain works. So I have a whole deck on teaching engineers how their own brain works. Because the weird thing is, there's all these cues. I am currently sending a lot of cues to you with my body motion and all that, my face. Well, it all goes away when you're talking to them on the phone, and it really goes away when you're talking over email. So you can get a lot of miscommunication, and that's something I work on a lot. Clarify your values, the behaviors that are okay. This is very important. And enforce them. Hire carefully, fire fast. Hiring is a critical one, and this is why it's very important when you're hiring to have a diverse set of people hiring, because I've definitely been in interviews where we had 4 males said yes, 1 female said no, and said, the guy kept looking at me funny. I was like, that's not good. We would have missed that if it was all males. So it's very critical you hire carefully. Teaching about communication, this is what I'm talking about. People don't know how their own brains work, much less how communication works. If you want some help, if you would like to see this, I'd love to share it. I'm starting to share it now. I basically talk about the way our human brain works with network diagrams, because engineers love that stuff. Okay, motivation. Here's a critical thing about motivation. You could have the most competent team, a respectful team, a trustworthy team, but if they don't give a crap, you can have a hard time. So this is really, are people excited to accomplish your mission? This is what I think the CEO's job is, get up every single week and get people pumped up again. No matter what was happening that week, on Friday, over beer, they're excited again about Monday. One way to break down motivation even deeper was described by a guy, Daniel Pink. He described it as 3 pieces: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Where autonomy is people like to they like to be their own people. And so they like to tread their own path. Mastery is all about, they like to build the world's greatest, something exciting, right? And purpose, they like to have a sense of direction. What's fascinating, and I'll get into this here, is that oftentimes, and I experienced this at Reddit, people mistake autonomy as a reward. And that can be a reward. It has to be done in the right sense, but if you have too much autonomy, it's bad, because now everybody's going in a different direction, people recognize that, and then it's bedlam. So don't make that mistake. Unclear purpose is extremely common. Where are we going? What are the goals? What's the prioritization? What am I supposed to be working on? You can fix motivation by giving an appropriate amount of autonomy, and there's a really good model for this if you're in this situation. It's called situational leadership. I think we'll send out the slides, but I have a link to it, or you can Google for it. And it talks about a way to look at a team, look at a person and what they're doing, and suss out how much coaching you should be doing versus how much direction you should be doing. And this is critical because this will affect their motivation. If someone feels they're being managed, micromanagement, they don't like working. Add good goals and incentives, and understand what your incentives, what people like about incentives. I found that one group in one company I was advising loved parties, which blew my mind because I'm an engineer. I don't like parties. It's social, right? But they like parties. Engineers, I think, like. Some of them like to be seen, and have a lot of respect among their peers. So try to get them speaking at conferences, do things like that. There's a lot of different incentives. Some are just incentivized by a little bit more money because they have a mortgage and San Francisco prices. And then ensure that your goal formulation balances the top down and the bottom up. This is something that we did at Reddit, I think, pretty well when we came in. The executives need to get together, and they need to formulate where things are going for the next quarter. But then they should go to the engineers and say, we need to build a search engine. Come back to me with a plan. And now everybody has been part of the planning process, and they're invested, and it leads straight to their motivation because they have a piece of the autonomy pie, and probably you'll get a better answer. It's funny, as an executive, I started to realize how distant I was from the problem sometimes. Trust. I left this one a little bit for last because it is the hardest. I felt like it can be really hard to regain once it's lost. And what trust is talking about is you'll know you have achieved trust when dependencies are not felt in the company. And what I mean by that is I should be able to build whatever team I'm on. I'm going to depend on a bunch of other teams. I need machines from operations. I need some new piece of service from infrastructure. I need these various other things. I need legal support from legal. But while I'm dependent on all of those groups, I don't want to feel the dependency. So it's all about have this graph of dependencies, making them not felt. In the same way, when I walk on this floor, I'm very much dependent on it, and I can trust that it will be solid. I hope. Oh, it's solid. It's my walking sucks. But you have to be able to trust, and if you do that, the great thing is your entire organization, everybody will work together, and you will be able to make products way faster. You'll just see them come all the way up. And I'll show you how you kind of identify it. They're often eroded by lack of healthy communication. You will see this oftentimes when people have an email going back and forth and it's getting heated. I actually tell people, if I see that email, you stop the conversation right there, you get coffee. Lack of healthy assumptions about others. This is also, I mentioned if you don't know why, you assume the worst. Engineers love to do this. What I tell engineers is focus on you. We've got plenty of problems. This is, I think, a line from someone at Netflix, I'm forgetting where. We've got plenty of problem finders. I need problem solvers. So I started working with my engineers to come to me with 3 solutions. And then you'll see that they will think far and deeper about what's going on, and they'll stop assuming that that group is a jerk. I've seen that so many times. They told me it was going to be here by Tuesday. It's not here. They must be jerks. No. So you got to actually teach people about what's actually going on. And so communication can help with that. Inconsistent delivery on promises. This leads to a lot of mistrust. So what we did inside Reddit that worked I believe worked really, really well, is to enforce when you set a date, that's maybe the most critical thing. And we will sometimes slip dates, but everybody, and it doesn't matter if you're working on Postgres, or if you're working on something in operations, or especially product where you've promised stuff by marketing, it does not matter. We want to get everybody into this cadence of delivering on promises, and then the trust comes all the way from the bottom to the product. Sometimes I wrote it, and the reason I say sometimes is because I don't want people to assume these. Dishonest or subversive individuals. I've seen this once in my career. This is, don't assume, if you extend someone trust, don't assume that they're a psychopath. I've seen that once. It was very interesting, and I was like blown away because he was such a nice guy. Seemed so smart, but it was all fake. His resume was all lies. It was really weird. But I've only seen this once, and that's why I say, do keep your ears open, but just assume that most of the people you hire won't have this, and I think you'll be happy. So how do we fix this? What I think is very important, especially for engineers and their teams, is they know who their customer is. And if they know who their customer is, their direct customer, then they reorient their job to making them happy. So you help them, you identify that customer. For instance, if you're on infrastructure, your job is not just to keep the site up, it's to make all the product people successful. Oh, wow! And then they start to actually orient, I think, to the direction that they're there for product. You're not just there for developers. Which I believe was a mistake that was made in the 90s, developer first. No, we're not making engineering for the sake of engineering, we're making products. Clarify team goals and ensure they're met on time. I believe the on time is so very critical, which is really weird. If I told myself that 10 years ago, I would have hated myself, but it is so critical. And one of the things that's difficult here is a lot of engineers will not like this. But if you start to talk to them about the why, then they'll start to understand, oh, it makes everything faster. If everybody works together and they're all delivering on time, it means there's a culture of trust. Increased direct communication. I find this to be the most critical. I usually see 2 engineers fighting. They come to me and say, Marty, that guy's a jerk. Marty, that guy's a jerk. I don't think they're jerks. And I say, you guys got to grab coffee every single week, and then you see really good human bonding actually happen, because people don't like to call each other jerks to their face, and then they see there's another human on the other side. It's very critical. Go get coffee together. Go. It became almost like my knee-jerk reaction. And then increased communication of status. Everybody wants to know a little bit about what's happening, and this becomes critical that you find that right level. But I find that as you get every team to disseminate status, one of the side benefits is if someone comes to me and says, I don't know what that team's doing, I'm like, did you read their email they just sent out? Ooh. And then they actually become responsible for themselves to get up to date on status. It's also critical because some of your teams need to know status of all the rest of the teams. So if you're an operations team and that team is going to launch some product and that communication didn't happen, you should be reading all those emails and be like, wait a minute, something got missed here, a step got missed. And now you actually can stop problems before they happen. I've kind of gone through a lot of these really fast, but I want to show you one more picture of all of these leading up. I use these for middle and safety tiers a little bit at Pinterest, and then I used them to pick apart Reddit. And the way I hope you can use them, I didn't go too much deep into them because I don't have time, but the way I hope you can use them is at least terminology and a strategy for how to take any organization, break it into these pieces, and then start to heal them, right? Anytime I have a big nebulous problem, I like to break it into smaller pieces. A couple of things I learned, this is leading to the end here. If you don't drive your company's culture, it will drive itself, and oftentimes off a cliff. So you have to drive it. It has to be part of your job. I think CTO and VP of Eng, this is half of your job, culture, and the other half is making sure stuff comes out on time and great tech happens, right? But the second thing I learned that really was good to learn, is fortunately the culture can be driven. I was a little nervous that this could be a really hard problem. This gets probably harder as the company gets bigger, but it can be driven. That's what's so critical, and I think it starts with you today. Just tonight, if it's a problem at your place, you can start to pick it apart. And if you need help, I'd love to help. So come talk to me afterward, or we'll grab email, we'll grab some coffee. And thank you. I'd like to any questions.
Thank you very much. People were talking about some problems with autonomous driving cars. I think autonomous driving cultures could also have some problems in that sense.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I want to open up the question round here. And by the way, those slides that you mentioned, we might want to post some of those.
Yeah.
Okay, or we'll get them out to you guys. We'll tweet them or something along those lines. Is anybody working on reshaping their culture right now? Oh, perfect. Can we get the cube, the blue cube of truth out there? To you? Yep. For the question? Yep. Just pass it down. Perfect.
Thank you for your speech. You said somewhere you have to guarantee safety as a pillar. But if you work in a big organization and you see that the market is changing and people don't want to open their eyes, you somehow have to tell them, see, the future is different. Otherwise you would lie to them, and that's not, then you're an asshole.
Yep.
So what's your answer to that?
Yes. How do you bring an org together if you've got a shift? The seeds are shifting. I think it goes back to transparency. Again, all the way back to that center of your brain that wants to know why and wants to fill in the reasons. And that's why I love vision. If you tell them where B is and you're looking out 5 years and you say, hey, look, the diesel engine's dead. The new thing's coming. And you're going to have a few people who are upset about that. Maybe, I actually don't know, ask a few people about that market. But if you show them the data, you show them the reason, give them the framework, and then apply the framework. That's one of my favorite techniques, because then people know the why, and then you answer their question by using the framework you just taught them. So I think especially in a company, you really need to build a really compelling vision, and then you need to get, one of the most critical things is part of your manager's jobs to disseminate that information and make it critical. So one thing I teach all managers, especially the new ones, is you never, ever, ever go against your boss. I know that sounds weird and somewhat self-serving, but it makes a good culture of trust there too. Even if you disagree with them, and you can have those discussions in private, but if everybody believes in it and it rolls all the way up, then you can get that information all the way down to the engineers and disseminate that information at scale. I'm a big believer in the framework, the why, and the vision.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Upstairs? Downstairs? No, perfect.
All right.
Well, perfect. Well, I just want here we go. Perfect. Touchdown.
So one more question. If you realize in a company that's really big and over different places spread, and you have a communication problem, how do you fix it? Do you use different tools or weekly meetings, or what is your approach to fix that?
So at some point, so how do we fix communication, especially at a bigger company? As the company is growing, you have to build your segmentation right, and there's certain layers that need to communicate in different dimensions. And I think the most important thing is to layer all of that out, so you know all the pieces. But you need to be communicating upward, very critical, and that should be, at each stage, it should be getting simplified into the one message they really need to understand. And then downward, they need to understand what's coming from the other direction. Then between teams, this is where it gets exponentially complicated. You've got an n-squared graph of communication that can happen. And that, I swear that changes maybe weekly, depending on the number of engineers, because at each stage is a different thing. In the early days of Pinterest, I could turn around and be like, hey, this website's down, and someone, the other guy and I would fix it. When the company's 100 and then 500 and higher, you have to segment those groups a little bit deeper, find the paths. One thing I introduced into Reddit to solve a major communication issue is there wasn't a consistent task system for bugs, for planning. So we just made it consistent across everybody. And then we built out a whole system so all that information can be, anybody can look at it, and we roll everything up to one central dashboard where you can see exactly the status of everything. So then people can go in and get the right level of information they need for their own thing. So if you're an operations person and you need to know what's coming out next week in terms of product, you can go in and look at your own slicing and view of what product is coming out. So I like to make the information generally available so that people can get the right level they need. I found email dissemination difficult because oftentimes people don't read the email. But I like to make it available. And then I like to make it very clear it is your job to be knowing what's going on. I don't like operations or infrastructure or product engineers to come to me and say, I didn't know this was coming out. Like, it's right there. So make it part of their job description to understand what's going on. More questions?
Perfect. Yeah. So we're slowly, communication's working, right? The questions are coming.
Yeah.
I work in a bigger company, I'm not in the management, but I do see that there's a big cultural issue. So how can I coach my management and the layers above that they realize that they have to do something about it, and that they start doing something about it?
So how do you get the leadership to realize there's a culture problem?
Exactly.
I'll start from one premise. I think you have the right premise, which is I think the culture comes from them. And you see this, there's a couple of companies that are having a lot of trouble in Silicon Valley because the CEO and or CTO and or others have a bad set of behaviors, and it goes all the way through. And at some point, something started to happen in these companies that just made it explode. And I don't know enough about what critical catalyst you need to recognize. I don't know if it has to go really bad before it's a problem, or if you can find that one executive who wants to listen. I think it at least starts with talking to your manager, and if they don't want to listen to you, I think it's always okay to go over their head and talk to their manager until you find somebody who wants to be your champion. At least that's the culture I believe in. I think you can always talk to your manager's manager, go all the way up. So I'd recommend just starting and talking with them and identifying it very succinctly. What is the problem? And maybe it comes down to it's a trust problem. These teams are not working together. And here's what you get out of it if we solve it. And if they see the why and the what could become of it, they might get convinced. And then you'll know you achieved it if they think it's their own idea. But I think it comes from first very concretely discussing what the actual issue is so that they don't. There's a funny thing with managers and humans in general. They may get defensive if you tell them, hey, your organization got a bad culture, because that's their job. So you're going to have to, I think it's going to have to come down to making a safe spot for them to maybe hear the bad news. And then once they get past that bad news and then they start to believe in it, then I think the healing can begin. It's an interesting question. We should talk about it.
Perfect, thank you. You have a question over here?
Launch it.
Ooh, nice catch.
Thank you. So in today's world, there are more and more people working in virtual teams spread out all over the world, not meeting each other, not being able to have a coffee, like you said,
yes.
or just get on the plane and have a coffee and come back next week maybe. How do you solve these culture issues with those teams?
So I can tell you what I've seen. I have not managed that size team because we didn't want to do that. A long time at Pinterest, we did not want to disseminate people, so we kept it really tight. And probably do so at Reddit also because I think that's an easier path, and there's a lot of problems we deal with. You keep everybody in the building; they see each other. It makes the problem easier, right? What I've seen is the remote office thing works if you do it very carefully. Google, I think, if I recall correctly, at one point had a lot of offices all over India, and they realized that it wasn't working very well, so they reconsolidated into, like, I think one in Bangladesh or New Delhi or something. Because all those little sites were not operating as efficient, and there were problems in a lot of them. What I found has worked in companies where we have done this and we send out is you take somebody from the company who understands how it all works, they understand the culture, and you stick them over there for a little while. You make them the manager, and now you've taken a little piece of the whole company over there, especially somebody who understands how the communication works, so they can do the across-the-wire communication of status and all of that while managing that team. So what you're really doing is taking an expert in communication and how the company works and the culture, and you're going to stick them over there to seed the culture. We did that actually a little bit, I think at Pinterest we made an office in Seattle, and it was seeded by some of the engineers who had been working at Pinterest for a while and were ready to step into management, and I think it went very well. I'm not entirely certain, but that's one way. I love the idea. You take a person who's going to be the carrier over there and is going to be the communication point.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
We're out of time. We can chat after if anybody's interested.
Yeah, you'll be right after there in the back, and we got something for you here. Just we want to send you back with a carry-on size bag and a set of headphones.
Thank you. All right.
And,
so
thank
much.
you. Yeah, seriously, thank you very much for coming out here. I was going to say, Victor's watching at home, by the way, so
Yeah,
we should grab coffee when we get back to San Francisco. But thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Folks, we're about to go on break. We'll be back here in about half an hour, so at 11. So enjoy some coffee, get back into shape, and we'll see you guys in a bit. Thank you. talked about really that industry area we've kind of omitted a little bit so far, but is here to talk about steel, in particular steel and what is transformative in the industry and what is actually changing, especially in regards to platforms cross industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Klöckner, Gisbert Ruhl. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand of applause. Welcome.
Yeah, hello everybody, and thanks for the invitation here to Zurich. We are, by the way, we have also a strong presence here in Switzerland, so I'm relatively often here in Switzerland. Our headquarters is not in Zurich, it's in St. Gallen. Yeah, we as Klöckner, we are I'm coming, as you can see, from a very conservative industry. I'm coming from the steel industry. And you might ask yourself, what the hell is a guy from the steel industry doing in such a fancy conference, on such a forward-looking conference? Yeah, the reason is that we, as Klöckner, started also a very intensive digital transformation about 4 years ago. And the reason why we started is that was on the one side the inefficiency in our industry. So we are a steel distributor. We typically buying steel from the big steel producers, and then we servicing the steel, and then we distributed the steel to customers from the automotive industry, appliances, construction, machinery, mechanical engineering, and also to small craftsmen, so to all kind of companies who are using steel in a way. And this supply chain, where we are, by the way, we are having 60% of our business here in Europe and 40% in North America, and then we have a small subsidiary also in Brazil, but the supply chain is everywhere the same. It's everywhere very inefficient. And because of this, we have to stock a lot of steel. We're stocking also locally a lot of steel in our warehouses, on our service centers, because we don't know what our customers, especially our customers, need tomorrow. And because we don't know what they need, we have to stock all the steel. And 4 years ago, we were thinking, what if this supply chain would be much more efficient? What if there would be a seamless information flow in this supply chain? What if there were more predictive sales information, for instance? Then we will probably don't need a significant part of our business, the stockholding business. We probably don't need this business anymore. And with this, I went first, as so many, not at that point in time, but meanwhile, of my colleagues to the Silicon Valley. And I had a lot of very interesting discussions in the Valley with people like Mark Andreessen, Jim Breyer, with Alex Karp, and so on. And then very motivated because of my visit, I went back to Germany, and then I tried to start this innovation, also this, to a certain extent, disruptive innovation. I tried to start this from within. And this failed. This failed completely because we, as a steel distribution company, were on the one side not that innovative anyhow, and we had difficulties to think out of the box. And especially, we had difficulties to think about disrupting ourselves. And then with this, I went to Berlin. And in Berlin, I made a startup tour, and there were 2 events which were very important for the future of Klöckner. One was I visited a company called Adventure, and when I came into the meeting room, there were a lot of notes everywhere, and I asked the guys, what does this mean? What have you done here? And they were saying, look, we wanted to prepare for this meeting. And we know that you're coming from steel as a steel distributor, and we gave a call to some of the general customers of the steel distribution industry, and we figured out then where the pain points are when they do business with you. And this was something we had never done. So I also made a lot of visits, or still making a lot of visits to customers. But I often asking questions like, "Are you happy with us?" and so on and so on. But we didn't really try to find out where really the pain points are when they doing business with us. So that was the first very important meeting. And then later on, during this tour, I went to a co-working space. I've never been until that point in time in a co-working space. And we went through this co-working space with the founders. And then there was one table was free. And then I asked one of the founders, "What does this table cost per month?" And she said, €1,000. And I said, "Okay, I'm renting this table." And then I gave a call to two of my, in this case, younger colleagues. And I said to them, "Look, on Monday, you have a new working place. You can leave your tie at home. Your new working place is in Berlin. It's in a co-working space, 3rd floor. And there's a table, and this is your working place for the next few months. And you first of all have to connect us to this startup world in Berlin. And secondly, you have to find out what startups doing different." And this is also was also a very important learning for us, because they working completely different than corporates. So when we doing a project, when we initiating a project, we typically make a big system analysis. We made sure that we don't forget anything. And this, by the way, also how we developed our first online shop. We tried not to forget anything, and then we started to program, and it takes time. And was, by the way, in this case, was also not successful, because the customers didn't like the web shop, and we really also hadn't asked them before. So we asked them later on when the web shop was ready. So typically how you do it in the corporate. And then we learned that these guys from the startup team, that they working completely different. That they starting first with the customer, with this customer ideation, that then they're coming back with a prototype, and that the first product is a minimal viable product, so not a product which has everything, a product only with minimum features, and so on and so on. But it was also clear that when we want to do the same, this will not work within our headquarters, for instance, in Duisburg. Impossible. And that's why we then established or founded a company in Berlin called Klöckner.ai. And meanwhile, we have here more than 60 employees. We have developers, we have online marketing people, we have business analytics people. So it's our, if you like, our own startup. And only 4 of these people coming from the corporate, and the remaining people are all coming from various startup companies. So with this setup, in the beginning we had less employees, of course. With this setup, then we started our innovation. And we started also in this hub to develop the first products. But then, at some point in time, after a couple of months, it was getting clear that this company is probably a bit too independent. So what we did in the beginning, we made clear that this Klöckner.ai hub should be very, very independent from the corporate. So even also technological decisions and everything have to be made by this hub by itself. But then on the other side, when you're doing this completely independent, then, and this is what we figured out then, on both sides, by the way, also the people in Berlin figured this out. In this case, we are then not able to leverage what we have. And we have the industry know-how, and we have the customer and supplier relationships. And therefore, we then started to move this hub a bit closer to the corporate. Not in a way that we integrated it in the corporate, but closer to the corporate. So, and we made sure that collaboration took place between Klöckner.ai and the corporate itself. And afterwards, some while, this went then relatively well and works better and better, I have to say. We had a certain fear concerning the cultural clash, but the cultural clash, interestingly, didn't happen. Because the people in Berlin, when they went to the corporate side, they were asking questions, like startups typically doing. So corporates are always trying to tell something, and startups asking questions. And they asking a lot of questions, and the people on the other side, so on the corporate side, feel very comfortable because they were saying, look, this was for the first time that there were not people coming who know everything better. They asking us how we do our business and what we could do better in our point of view. So the collaboration worked then very well. But then we had another problem. We developed all these front-end tools, online shops, contract platforms, and so on for our customers. And but then we figured out that only developing all these front-end tools also doesn't work when the back-end is also not digitalized, and when the people on the corporate side not really supporting these new systems. One example, when you have a sales guy on the one side and on the other side there's a purchasing guy, and when they are both not convinced that this is the right step into the future, then they will not support this. But they fear, of course, to support this because they fear to lose their job in the end. So you also have to make sure that your employees understand this not only rationally, that is not enough. And you also have to make sure that they are supporting this emotionally. And we did this by, for instance, by establishing a digital academy. So our people within Klöckner have the right to do digital courses on this academy during working hours, unlimited. And what we were saying to them is, look, when you're doing this, we will make sure that you have a future within Klöckner. Whatever happens, also with artificial intelligence and whatever happens, but we will make sure that you have a future going forward. We also started to communicate in a different way. Traditionally, we of course had the same problem in all corporates, that communication from top to the bottom is very difficult and takes very long. And here, this was, by the way, by chance. So I think it was about 3 years ago, my head of IT came to me and was saying, look, we have now Office 365, and with this we have Yammer. And I said, what is Yammer? And he said, this is some kind of an internal Facebook. And I said, yeah, and what can we do with this? He said, yeah, we can open it. I said, you open it. And we opened it, and meanwhile, this is the main communication tool within our organization. So we have a hierarchy-free communication. And I'm able now to communicate, for instance, with salespeople, which I even don't know, in various countries directly. So we have much better top-down and bottom-up communication, and also a much better horizontal communication between all the sites. So we have 170 sites in Europe and North America, and there was no communication between the sites before. And now we have all this horizontal communication. So I would say without the possibility to communicate with all the employees, also this change would not have been successful in our organization. So this works also meanwhile pretty good. So we started, but we needed to do more, by the way. We needed to do more. For instance, failure culture is also something which is extremely difficult to implement in a traditional corporate. Because what you learn when you want to make a career in a corporate is, of course, not to make any failures. And now, all of a sudden, we're saying to these guys, to the people, look, you can also make failures. And even also here again, when they understand this rationally, also this is not enough. So they also have to learn this emotionally. And this is the reason why we started fuck-up nights. I don't know what fuck-up nights are.
I'm surprised that you guys have fuck-up nights.
Yeah, we have fuck-up nights. Yeah. So we started Fuck Up Night, so our people were also a bit disoriented when I was saying through Yammer all of a sudden now we're starting Fuck Up Night. But I explained what this is. So Fuck Up Nights is also something we learned in Berlin that takes once a month or so. And then founders who failed are telling potential founders or new founders why they failed. And this is very successful, and the people, especially new founders in Berlin, like this very much. And I thought, okay, maybe we do the same. So we started then the first Fuck Up Nights. I did the first Fuck Up, by the way, and now we implementing this also throughout the organization to learn to fail, but of course only when we innovate. So this is also something which you, of course, have to make clear. Failure culture doesn't mean that you can now make failures everywhere. Now, when you are working for Swiss, for instance, it may be not that good to make a failure when you do your maintenance of a plane, of an airplane or so, and when you're working for an electricity company, might be also not that good when you have doing failures by maintenance of nuclear power plants. But okay, this is something we explained our people, and now because I think without this failure culture, it's not possible to innovate. So this is at least also something we learned. So we now, with this setup in Berlin, with this more than 60 people, by the way, I'm also the CEO of this hub in Berlin. That makes it much easier to make decisions, and because I'm on both sides. But with this setup, we developed all the proprietary online shops, platforms, and so on to do online business with our customers. So in August, we did already 70% of our sales online. So we more than doubled this within 1 year. But now we are at a very important point, because we had from the beginning not only the idea to do more online business. We wanted finally develop an open industry platform, where all market participants are connected, and that means also our competitors. And this is, by the way, also something which is not easy to communicate into an organization, saying that the competitors of today are customers of the platform tomorrow. But it's also clear this will only work when this new setup is much more independent than Klöckner.ai in Berlin. Finally, Klöckner will have only a minority stake in this new setup, but we believe in this open platform because finally, when you think it from the customer point of view, then it's of course the optimum for the customer is when they have access to one platform, and through this platform that they can then make price comparisons and whatever through this platform, that they have access to all kind of distributors. But this platform will also be, no doubt about, to a certain extent cannibalize our sales on the physical side again. For instance, with this platform, there probably producers will have the possibility to do more direct sales to our customers. So cut the middleman. We are the middleman in this case. So we're cutting to a certain extent our business here by ourselves. But on the other hand, we feel as Klöckner, because we started digitalization so early, we feel also well prepared to compete in the online world with all our marketing, online marketing knowledge, and with all the business analytics knowledge we have and so on. We feel very comfortable that we will be here successful. But it's difficult to say how this is going to work going forward. But from a customer's point of view, such a platform, especially in fragmented industries, such platforms will come going forward. I have no doubt that this will be the case. And in our case, we then want to at least have a significant share on this platform. So that's where we are today. And maybe this now from my side, and I understand that we also want to have a Q&A session here, and now I'm open for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I gotta say, I'm very The one thing I was not expecting was fuck-up nights in a traditional industry such as the steel industry. I mean, that is something I was like, wow, really? I mean, congratulations, Susie, on taking that initiative, because that's something that even many companies that are very innovative that don't do that. And that somebody like you guys in the steel industry is doing that is actually quite incredible to see that it really transcends industry, both traditional and more modern. So I would ask, how many of you guys actually have a fuck-up night in your company? Yeah, and how many of you guys work at startups and innovative companies? Yeah, okay, so he's ahead of you guys, so catch up. But folks, I want to open the round to questions. Who's actually working in an industry that would be considered more traditional? Yeah? So where do you guys see potential for improvement, and maybe some questions that you could ask him in terms of what he's learned and what recommendations you could get from it? Because I mean, steel is probably what I would consider one of the very traditional industries. I mean, it doesn't get very much more traditional than that. So I want to open up the round of questions. Do we have, oh, here we go. This is a steel girder.
And could I get my water?
Oh yes, bring up some water. So, who wants to ask the first question? Maybe regarding, how to start a fuck-up night at your companies. Is a good one to start with? Okay, this is not steel, by the way.
Too soft for us.
The Kleckner edition is too hard to throw.
I was wondering, you mentioned Yammer that you implemented into the organization. How big is your organization?
So we have about 9,000 employees.
And the follow-up question would be, how do you guys try to control the communication between the teams, or how do you make sure that they communicate effectively and not using it in terms of just for entertainment?
Interestingly, we don't control anything. So that's so everyone can open a group or so. And but what I clearly can say is that our employees are using it not for entertainment by themselves. So that was from the beginning. That went relatively well, and okay, they posting when there is someone with a 25th anniversary or something like this has been posted, but no photos, for instance, from their holidays or so on. That is really not happening. Interestingly, so they using it in a way that all this. What I also heard from other companies who wanna start with Yammer, that they have the fear that employees doing something with Yammer what doesn't happen, but it's not happening. This is interestingly the case, it's not happening. So we don't control anything, and everyone can do anything on Yammer.
Do you have any other questions? Maybe regarding the EQ. So you started a second company in Berlin that's grown to 60 people. How long did it take for you guys to reach 60 people? I mean, how quickly did you grow?
So we founded this company, I think, 2.5 years ago.
Okay, wow.
And it was, interestingly, the question how to get people to come, even if it's called .I, so Klöckner.I, but everyone knows, okay, it's part of the steel company. And how to get innovative people into such kind of company. And there, from the beginning, the startup scene in Berlin were looking what we are doing, because when we started in this co-working space, we of course were also something which typically is
very unique.
It's very unique for a co-working space, having a steel company in a co-working space. So then a lot of media interest came and so on. And then our people joining Klöckner are people who coming mostly from B2C and who want to do something different, and who want to get in touch with B2B. And so they are interested in really what we're doing. But you of course have to make sure that this hub is working like a startup. They also want to have quick decisions and so on, because otherwise they will leave. So when it would be too much corporate then they would leave. So this balance, keeping this balance, is not easy between collaboration with the corporate, but not be integrated into the corporate. This is very difficult, and it might be easier in this case because I'm the CEO of both, so I can handle this. But you have to handle it.
So you're really the person who's kind of making the bridge. I mean, you lead both companies from the top in that case to kind of bring that out there. And did you see it harder to find talent at the beginning, or do you think it's easier now that you've kind of established a presence and you say, hey guys, look, we've done so many cool things, we have a lot of independence, but we have this large company behind us that is actually backing us. So we're not building a cat video sharing app, we're actually building something that is changing, physical services industry.
In principle, it's more easier now, but the only bottleneck are developers. But this is in general the problem in Berlin currently to get developers. But we're trying to hire them from everywhere. So we have 60 people out of 14 nations.
40, okay.
So people from Brazil, people from Israel. So our new CTO, for instance, comes from Israel, and so we try to get hire these people from everywhere.
Perfect. I want to open up the round to some questions again. Yeah, in the back. I love that box. It's just.
I wonder, how did you yourself as a person manage to make this movement from corporate to startup thinking, or still wearing both hats now?
You mean I'm looking very much like a corporate guy? But by the way, when I'm in Berlin, I'm also typically have a suit and a tie, and to be honest, that is no problem at all. So when I would come, when I would come there in jeans or so, they might be a bit disoriented. And I'm also I'm knowing a lot of founders in Berlin, and sometimes I'm also invited, let's say, to a pizza meeting of a startup and to on Friday afternoon to make a speech or so. And but I also then I don't change my clothes. I think this is important, that you have to be yourself, and then people are taking you serious. But to be honest, I don't have any from the beginning. I don't have any issues with the culture in Berlin, and what I tried from the beginning is, and I think we meanwhile this works, but this also took some time. I would say about 2 years. I tried to implement some of this culture also on the corporate side, but meanwhile we have some, for instance, also a program where people from the corporate side can go 3 months to Berlin to work in this startup. So there is a lot of collaboration, and when the people on the corporate side have any meetings concerning these online tools, they typically invite the startup people meanwhile by themselves. And our labor council is, for instance, once a year when they have their meeting in Berlin in this startup environment. They also made a startup tour in the past and so on. So I always try to make sure that it's then integrated or that there is collaboration, but at the same time I may have to make sure that they're staying independent. So they still they're still working in another cloud than we working on the corporate side or so on. They're still making their own technological decisions and so on. This hasn't changed.
But I mean, how did you manage as a person to allow failure, to not follow processes, and to decide by yourself, I'm going to support this?
Yeah, I also had to a certain extent, change myself. So I went also to, I would say, change process, but because this, I was convinced from the beginning that this is the right way. So I'm in corporate since 30 years, and since 30 years I have I had all these projects which took more time, which more costly, which were complex, which always it was always we had always this difficult situation that nothing really worked like we wanted it, and when I learned so my the most important learning was, I think, this minimal viable product. That was my most important learning. And from the beginning, I was convinced that this is the right way. And when I'm also on the corporate side, when I'm doing something today, I'm always thinking, what is the MVP? What is really necessary and what doesn't make any sense? But you have to change yourself too. So I'm not the youngest anymore, but even if you're getting older, you still can change yourself. When you are convinced from something, I think this is, of course, important.
What sparked that interest? Because you say you're a corporate guy, but I think in many, many ways you're actually a startup guy in a suit right now. So I think I just want to point that out. I mean, like there's guys in suits, there's guys in flip-flops. A friend of mine, he went to work one time in a bathrobe, this is in the Silicon Valley. But I mean, like that's one side. But I mean, what really brought you that point when you woke up one day and you're like, you know what? I think I need to do something different. I think we need to do something different. What kind of sparked that idea?
So look, when you are like me, 30 years. So I was always in very conservative environments. So our machinery industry, automotive industry. Steel, coal, even coal in the coal mining and things like that. But you're always seeing how inefficient everything is. And all of a sudden, and when you then all of a sudden comes an idea how you really can do things different and much more easy, much less complex. This is what convinced me from the beginning, and this is what was also driving to a certain extent to change my personal change.
Thank you very much. I want to open it back up to some more questions. I saw some. Just throw it there. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. My question was, why create your own platform if there can already be some enterprise, generic, white label platforms out there?
Yeah, I think so. For B2B. There is no platform which we can easily take for the steel and metals industry, and I think also other successful B2C platforms are all proprietary. So far, Amazon is also a proprietary platform, and this is what we learned also, that we need our own technology stack finally, and that's the reason why we do it by ourselves.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, please bring the follow-up.
And then, not using a platform, but maybe a third party, already a consulting company that can create the platform for you.
Yeah,
this is normally the norm in corporate world.
Yeah, we also. So I think so. When we started, we worked closely together with a company called Adventure, and they developed for us the first tools. And this was also the right way to do, I think, because we were not able at the beginning to do this. But then, but that was clear from the beginning. So I would say, roughly 1 year later, we then started to transform this to our people. So we then started to employ developers and so on, and then we transformed the knowledge and the technology to our people. And I think finally, when you want to build such a big platform, it's very difficult, I think, when this is being done from someone from outside.
Good. Perfect. Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Hello. I was wondering, what kind of Chinese wall do you have between the two entities? How does the data transfer between the two entities work? Because I suppose you don't want to have industrial secrets from the core corporate business to go to the other more technological entity that you founded. So is there a protocol, a technical one, a legal one? Is that more organically organized?
So there are practically no Chinese walls between Klöckner and Klöckner.ai. So we transfer. So we are on the corporate side. We have SAP. So, but all what we're developing is not directly connected to SAP. So we have kind of a tunnel where we exchange the data. But of course, there will be some kind of wall now with this new setup, with the independent platform company. And there we then have to decide, like other participants on the platform, which data we share and what we're getting from sharing the data. And the principal idea is that the more data you're sharing, the more information you're getting back. And when someone wants to be on the platform, or when someone on the platform doesn't want to share anything, okay, then he's getting also no predictive data, predictive sales in a region or whatever, predictive demand and all things which will be provided finally by the platform.
But are you rather thinking of technical solutions or more like discretionary decisions to decide which will go where?
Yeah, both. No? So we will have to make the decisions, but we also need technical solutions to handle it on the platform finally. But because we then have to handle it when the platform is successful for thousands and thousands of customers.
Perfect. I saw some other question, just a little bit further back.
Thank you. What will you do with the data from your platform from the competitors? To use the data from your competitors on the platform?
No, on the platform. So we currently on this proprietary platform it's easy. We are the seller, and then we have all. We have of course the customer data. But this is something we had also in the past, but we did not really anything in the past with this data. And but on the platform will be finally independent. So Klöckner is not getting access to the data. So that is part of the platform business. No, we have Klöckner will finally have a stake in the platform, but Klöckner will not dominate, and Klöckner will have also no real influence in this platform, because the strategy of the platform finally is not necessarily aligned with the Klöckner strategy. It could also move in different ways. But we have to keep it independent, because otherwise it would be, of course, difficult to get other competitors on the platform. But this will also be realized by other investors in this platform. So from the beginning, we will be, by the way, from the beginning. So when we took the first investors to the platform, we then want to be already a minority shareholder of the platform.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, a question about Vakantnight. How would you stimulate people to climb on the stage and tell or explain their failure?
Yeah, that's obviously not easy. So we did the first Vakantnight in a way that I was starting with the first paper, and then we had two guests, one from a startup and one from another company, and that was the first time. And then what we experienced is that not all of the people will tell, all of our people are able to tell their fuck-ups. So these are typically people, I would say, who are successful enough and have self-confidence, and they're doing it, but not everyone. But we don't force also anyone to do it. But with this, it works.
Perfect, thank you. We have time for one or two more questions. We'll toss it back in the middle here. Right, just straight ahead, down your row. Touchdown.
Hello. I was wondering how you manage the cultural change of Klöckner in behalf of resistance. I can imagine that you have managers in your team that are very successful but very resistant to that change. I think you cannot fire them so easily like we have heard before, but you have to balance there a lot of things. I wonder how do you manage that?
Yeah, also on level 1 and 2 we did a management appraisal, and the result of the management appraisal was indeed that most of our management was good to go with the company straight ahead, to do what we did in the past. And only some had the ability to drive change, some were a bit neutral, but we also had some who are not interested in change anyhow. But these people are no more with the company. But I'm saying this also clearly, I have to say, to our employees. I'm saying, so everyone who wants to be with us is getting our support and our help. Also with this digital academy, but it's give and take. But when there are employees who don't want this, who don't want to have this change, they are probably better off with another company. I'm saying that also quite clearly. I think you always have to do both. You have to be clear to your people, but you have to give them also support if they want to go with you, if they want to drive this change.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's it for the question round. Thank you very much. I really want a big hand of applause. Seriously. And we're also going to send you back. We're getting you ready for Friday. A nice Friday bag and a headset to go with that as well. So, thank you very much. Absolutely. It's really glad to have you here, and thank you very much. Another round of applause. Fuck up nice. No, that's not our next speaker. But we are going to talk a little bit about business plans and startup phrasing and why maybe that's not the right way to go forward with this. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Managing Director of Telluride Venture Accelerator, Mark Dogger. Mark, thank you. Good to have you here.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Mark. Wow, that's a big picture of me. I am the actual, why am I here today, actually? I'll give you a little bit of my background. Who here has heard of Startup Weekend, perhaps? All right, so I'm one of the co-founders of Startup Weekend, which is an event series educating entrepreneurs that we started about 9 years ago. The whole idea was, how can we create experiential education for entrepreneurs? How can we show people how to do entrepreneurship, not tell them? I think we all understand it's a little bit more of an art than a science, something you can't learn sitting in a classroom. So Startup Weekend was born. We ended up taking that on a mission to scale around the world. Today it's held in more than 140 countries. About 500,000 people have gone through it. We've had at least 3 $1 billion companies come from Startup Weekend events. It's happened in almost every country except for North Korea, which we all know is a place that could use it. Anyway, we grew Startup Weekend into a parent organization called Up Global. It was a merger with the Startup America partnership where I got to work with the Obama administration on advancing entrepreneurship, specifically in the US and around the world. Steve Case, the founder of AOL, was our chairman of the board there. And then about 2 years ago, we ended up merging with Techstars, where I became an executive with Techstars. Obviously, they have a strong presence here in London and Berlin as well. I was Chief Community Officer there, so I spent a lot of time. I've traveled to more than 50 countries. I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, governments around the world, all on this premise of entrepreneurship. So hopefully I can share a little bit do a really quick brief history, and a lot of what I think might be contrarian beliefs. I don't want to stand here and tell you things that you probably have read or could go read somewhere else. I'm going to try to give you some useful statistics about entrepreneurship. Now, I know a lot of folks in the room are from corporations as well. Innovation and entrepreneurship, synonymous, right? Innovation is predicated on the same values, the beliefs of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. So I'm going to focus on that entrepreneurship piece. So hopefully that's relatable to you, whether you're starting a company, you've started one, you're running one, working in a big company, trying to be more entrepreneurial. Give you a little bit of that. Most importantly, ich bin auch ein Schweizer. Meine Großmutter gewohnt in Andermatt. Sie war dort aufgewachsen, aber mein Deutsch ist nicht so gut. Ich war in Amerika aufgewachsen. Das war vor 2 Tagen in Andermatt, an the Goshenen. So, a little bit of history with entrepreneurship. One of the first great examples, obviously trade money was created. One of the first great business models ever invented, though, was the mill for actually milling flour. If we look around the world, we see, coming from the ancient Greeks, this model. How did that one invention make it almost further faster than any other invention since the wheel? It was really the model that Thales came up with. And it was, he took a percentage of future profits from farmers who he gave the mill to. And that allowed one of the first great franchise models to be invented. Obviously, through trade, exploration was a huge, huge part of it. This was Queen Elizabeth with Christopher Columbus. And then, of course, venture capital, the more modern era of what we now consider entrepreneurship venture capital, born with George Jorio, obviously a neighbor here, many of you are also familiar with. And that has really led to a proliferation today of what we call the modern startup founder. That's where I'm going to spend a little bit more time, hopefully debunking some of the myths around entrepreneurship actually involved with it. But as we can see, a lot of this has been enabled with technology trends around the world. Things like Barcamp, couch surfing. Who here remembers couch surfing before Airbnb existed, right? Okay, Facebook, obviously the iPhone. All of these platforms, technology has been the key driver of. This is a really funny one. People tend to ask me, is entrepreneurship, is this startup thing, is it a trend? And I found this data, a research report you can get from MTV Insights. Arguably not the most credible resource, but MTV did have an incredible impact on our entire generation living today. Everybody remembers MTV. It's really what helped create pop culture. They went out and they tried to figure out, what are we going to call the generation after the millennials? You know what they came up with? The founders. Now they have no stake in innovation, startups, entrepreneurship. MTV is calling the next generation the founders. Holy shit. Okay, so this isn't just a trend, it's not going away, it's getting bigger. We're part of something, everybody sitting in this room, that's not going to get any smaller, it's only going to get a lot bigger. So, what can we do? And how is that going to change things? I love this statistic, or not really a statistic, but really a fact. Ernst & Young, probably one of the biggest financial institutions, at least on the research side, talking about education. So how do we educate people in the next generation, the founder generation? How do we actually support the creation, the education? Well, universities aren't going to be the best answer. And now we're starting to see a lot of corporations actually do the studies of how much that actually impacts the performance within their companies. It doesn't. So the old models, the systems around education, around universities, around supporting innovation, they're not going to be the same. That's kind of scary. So all of the corporations now today are trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we act differently? Obviously, turning to us. What industries do we need to pay attention to? Even with some questionable looming downfalls on the economy, are we in a bubble? Are we not? I don't know. There's a lot of opportunity that will always be had. I think we can kind of all look at these and say, all right, those tend to be the ones. How is the steel manufacturer going to actually deal with the invention of automated cars, artificial intelligence? Important questions that we all have to ask. And where is the future of entrepreneurship going? I think it's not coming down to how do we support entrepreneurs, really. It's talking more about some critical issues, subcategories within entrepreneurship. I love doing work in Europe and anywhere really outside, including in the US. But diversity is really an issue, right? I mean, look around the room. Most of us are white dudes, right? Women, thank you, great job. Thanks for coming out. But we have to start to change that, especially in Switzerland, such a diverse country. How do we continue to make sure that the people showing up in the rooms, talking about innovation, talking about entrepreneurship, represent the general population in our countries? I think that's really important. The second thing is rural. As we saw with Brexit, as we saw with Trump getting elected, we've got some real issues around the populist movements in the world. Why? In the US, we have over 1,000 counties. Everybody know what a county is, I guess? We have our states, our counties, and then our cities. But we have over 1,000 counties. If you look at the economic growth since the last recession in 2008, all of the growth can be attributed to 52 counties out of more than 1,000. And I think that's the same issue that we see in a lot of countries around the world, is that a lot of the economic value that's being created is not in the rural sector. And traditional industry, the last speaker, obviously a perfect example of that. So I want to give you a few stats about kind of the state of entrepreneurship and how we got here. Interestingly enough, in the US, and I'll give you the source for all this data afterwards, but in World War II, almost 50% of the people returning ended up becoming entrepreneurs, either working for a small business or starting one. Today we have over 6,000 professors in entrepreneurship. Do you know how many professors in entrepreneurship we had 10 years ago? Probably a couple dozen. So we have an incredible industry built around this. In the US, it's over $2 billion spent on this industry supporting entrepreneurship. Yet there's no evidence in the US that this $2 billion being spent actually can contribute to any positive results, or at least more than normal results for entrepreneurship. Firm formation is actually going down. Well, we might have the founder generation coming up. We might have a lot of entrepreneurship kind of taking the limelight in the media. We actually have firm formation has gone down 200,000 since 1980 to 2016. So we're actually in a really interesting time. The last thing to mention, they also did a study. More than 77% of Americans hate their jobs. Not surprising, right? But entrepreneurship, if you actually look at the jobs that people do like, entrepreneurship was by a clear margin the most favored, most beneficial, and happiest of any vocation. So let's talk about entrepreneurship, startup success rates, because we kind of romanticize this idea. Become an entrepreneur, become an internal innovator, right? Let's follow it. So in the US at least, only 75% ever make it past the first year. Okay, 25. 30% past the fifth year, 70% are dying, and 20% by year 10. So that means you have 4 out of 5 odds of actually dying if you are going to choose the path of entrepreneurship. Now we try to break that apart between corporations and general entrepreneurs. I think the statistics kind of hold true. They're good heuristics, good rule of thumb. Just to tell you how grim it is, how tough it actually is. One thing that I actually like to look at too, we really push profitability in startups, young companies. The average age of profitability for a company in the US for a startup is actually year 7. Interesting statistic. So what does that say about what we demand out of the entrepreneurs, business units that we're trying to create? Average age is over 40 years. Average age of an entrepreneur. We have this narrative of the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, right? Being the 25-year-old person working in a garage or in now a co-working space. It's actually the average age in the US of a person who starts a new firm, 40 years old. 80% of people who start new firms in the US are over the age of 35. So the data does not align with the belief of who is actually starting companies. We all understand that it's important. We do have this narrative that coming from a university, everybody should go to university, study entrepreneurship, start a company. That's also an incredible myth. And that's something I challenge all of you to make sure that when we go back out in the world, that we also challenge the world with. Because university students actually make horrible entrepreneurs. Statistically. The 5-year survival rate is only 5% in the US. And a lot of this data comes from the Kauffman Foundation. Again, I'll give you a book to go read afterwards. 70% of entrepreneurs earn outside income. We also have this idea of, okay, I'm going to start a business on the side, right? I'm going to be a part-time entrepreneur. That might be actually one of the only statistical things or a piece of advice that I can give any entrepreneur. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's full-time, not part-time. It's the kiss of death, statistically, if you're going to be a part-time entrepreneur. So, some fun stats there. Startup competitions. We have Hack Zurich. I'm going to go spend a bunch of time with the teams here later today and tomorrow. So we have 2 different types, kind of the type that happened in the private market, like a startup weekend, what I've been a part of, but we also have like the university business competitions. Rice University in the US is one of the most well-known ones. They have the biggest prize. The winner gets $3 million. Less than 35% of the winners, granted that's coming from pools of thousands of startups and entrepreneurs, less than 35% actually have any type of success. So these competitions we put tons of money and energy into, they don't work. So think about what we're doing in our companies, at our corporations, in our societies, in our schools. It doesn't work. That sucks. That's scary. I don't know what the right answer is, but I want to give you some data at least so we can all figure out the right answer together. Less than 10% of the startups that came from Startup Weekend had any 5-year survival rate. So we have, again, a couple billion-dollar companies that have come from doing thousands of Startup Weekends around the world. But it's really low. So we need to be really careful about romanticizing this narrative of everybody should be an entrepreneur. Here's the book that's coming out in January from the former director of the Kauffman Foundation. Highly recommend it. It's got a ton of statistics. I just chose a few of them out of here. But probably one of the smartest minds who's looked at more data than anybody else on the planet on entrepreneurship and innovation and the success rates of it. So you can pre-order it, I think, on Amazon right now. So some more risks, right? Again, I believe for the first time in history that entrepreneurship is a viable career. Is entrepreneurship actually a career? No, I don't think it is. It's something we can be entrepreneurial, we can have values of entrepreneurs, but we need to be very careful building programs and universities and sending people into the world of entrepreneurship, telling them that you completed this and now you're an entrepreneur. We need to be really careful of that. So we hear this a lot, keep calm, fail fast, this whole notion of fail fast. There's actually a lot of data around entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. Surveying them, we often think of entrepreneurs as incredibly risky individuals. The data actually shows entrepreneurs are more risk averse than any other part of our population in the US. They're more risk averse. Why? Because I think once you've already become an entrepreneur, you self-select into it. You see the world a little bit more analytically. You evaluate your options maybe a little more clearly. I don't know. But when we think about failure too, every time somebody fails, are they more valuable? Are they learning constantly? We like to always summarize failures with some beautiful, simple, clear, articulate way to say, oh, that company failed because of this. That startup didn't work because of that. That business unit died because there was no revenue. There wasn't enough, there wasn't the right team, right? But I think that failure with startups is incredibly complex, and we can't oversimplify it. So when we are encouraging people to fail, we don't actually understand what's driving the failure. We often oversimplify the lessons of what actually caused the failure, because often it's many things, not one thing, that cause those failures. So again, we need to be very careful about over-glorifying fail fast. Business plans. This was kind of the crux of it. All of it kind of ties into this, but business plans. Maybe the one single way, the common language that we've developed to think about business plans. Where did it come from? Where did business plans actually come from? It was really an invention out of banks and financing institutions to help them understand and mitigate risk. Banks are really good at that, right? Several of you in the room are working for banks. What are you really good at? How many employees do you have dedicated to risk, understanding and mitigating risk, right? And what we did is we created this, arduous process of creating a plan. Oftentimes, I think in business plans, that's actually, are the seeds of your own failure. If you look at most of the stories of great entrepreneurs, none of them had plans. None of them wrote really big things and applied for all kinds of grants, and it's just unbelievable. I think the amount of emphasis that we put on business plans when we have it statistically, both objectively and anecdotally, we have a lot of evidence that supports that plans might be a useful exercise to force some good research, some good understanding, some thoughtfulness about your company. But does it actually predict success? No. Here's another one driven by short-term gains from the finance, the venture capital world. Business plans, the average one actually calls for an exit within 5 years because that's what investors want, right? But the statistics actually show it's not until year 11 on average that they're either go public or that they have an acquisition of some sort. My advice ends up kind of being boiled down to don't focus on the specific risk as an entrepreneur. Don't overanalyze everything. Anticipate the generic risks. And you have to just understand things at a higher level because you can't control a lot of things. So my question to a lot of you coming to this conference, being part of this innovation conversation, are you an entrepreneur? 3 clear things that I like to challenge people on over drinks. Action versus intent. What have you actually done? If you call yourself an entrepreneur, what have you done? You're not an entrepreneur if you're trying to do something, if you're thinking about doing something. You're only an entrepreneur if you've done something. Just a clear rule I'm trying to draw in the sand. Profit seeking. I started Startup Weekend. It was actually a for-profit. We flipped it into a non-profit in the US, 501c3, so that we could end up getting a bunch of grant money, including from the European Commission, and great, like helped us grow. It was a business model decision. But this whole proliferation around social enterprise, I think, is a very dangerous thing. Oftentimes what I see, it's an excuse to not have a business model. We have a lot of entrepreneurs out there in the world today trying to make great change. But let's look at the organizations, the corporations, the entrepreneurs who have had the biggest impact in our world. Social impact in our world. All of them started by scratching their own itch, a real problem, a real business, and then they were able to change it. Right? You want to save the whales? Go start a really successful company in the fishing industry with different values. Right? Pursuit of growth, I think that's one thing. There's a difference between small business and somebody who wants to grow a business. So when we do think about innovation, entrepreneurship, the pursuit of growth is an incredibly important aspect of it. So if you can align with these three things, I would call you an entrepreneur. Just remember, bad ideas are real. Bad ideas cannot build great companies. This is a smart frying pan. Never has it been so fucking hard to make an egg in the morning. If you've ever used it. Segway. We had Jeff Bezos, we had John Doerr, some of the biggest investors, venture capitalists in the world got behind Segway. They raised almost $100 million, I think, in their first or second round. One of the biggest flops in terms of entrepreneurial stories. They thought it was going to redefine how we think about cities and parking and everything else. They're kind of a funny tourist thing now, right? Types of entrepreneurs. High tech, we've talked a little bit about kind of the fallacy of the high tech entrepreneur working out of the garage, being in their 20s. It's actually, if you look at new firms in the US and what businesses are actually started, it's only 5%. They get almost 99% of the media, but only about 5%, and they have about a 30% success rate at 5 years. The spin-out entrepreneurs actually have the highest success rate of any entrepreneur. This one's an important one for the corporates. We're going to unpack this a little bit this afternoon in my workshop. But spin-out entrepreneurs account for about 15% of new forms being created. On average, they've spent 15 years working in the corporate world. On average, 7 years at the specific company they're leaving, the last company they left. So they're actually some of the most loyal employees to corporations that have better ways to do things that spin out, and then they have 40% success rate. Incredible. Those are the entrepreneurs I actually want to spend the most time with, just based on this, because it looks like they're going to be the most. Franchises, replicative, kind of copycat entrepreneurs actually account for the most percentage in the world. 30% for franchises. So franchise, like a food chain or something like that, kind of falls on that. Merchants, kind of more the small business, the retail, and they actually have the lowest success rate when we think about types of entrepreneurs. A few other key things that I've learned I want to make sure to share with you. Mentors are like mushrooms. Working at Techstars, I actually run an accelerator program right now. We've built a lot of emphasis in corporate innovation programs, in accelerator programs, and incubators, and universities around mentors. Mentors can be great. Mentors can be horrible. I think I've seen more mentors kill businesses than actually help businesses. But we've created these structures where entrepreneurs are told, okay, if somebody comes in the room, listen to them, whatever they say is going to be good. And then they turn around and they get different advice. Then they turn around and get different advice, right? So mentorship is actually a valuable part of the entrepreneurial journey, but we need to be careful about how we set up our entrepreneurs, our innovators, when we're pairing them with mentors, getting advice, and the expectations that we place on that relationship. There's a lot packed into this slide. You can only learn by doing. I'm going to go through this one quickly. You all can read. It's not for kids. Entrepreneurship, I'm an exception, I guess. When I started a company, statistically, everybody's older than I am and smarter than I am too. Good companies don't happen overnight. We have a lot of models that are predicated on 3 to 5 year venture returns. As an investor now, as somebody who plays in the angel investment kind of world and accelerator world, you have to change your time horizons. actually venture capital is pretty irrelevant. So if we look, if it takes 14 years to go to IPO, if we actually look back on the Inc. 500, the 500 fastest growing companies in the US in 2004, only 7% ever took any venture capital money. Wow, okay, so 14 years, average time to hit success. We look back, only 7% of today's successful companies, ever took venture capital. So we need to be careful about how much input or how much leverage we take from the venture capital models. Being a single founder CEO is actually accounts for the biggest percentage of successful businesses. Over 20-year longitudinal study that Kaufman did. Most entrepreneurs end up getting fired from their own companies. Why? Because you have to become a great manager. You have to manage people. I like to say business is easy, people are hard. That's something we all have to deal with on a daily basis, I think. Getting a cold circle, that's another one of the most valuable things. Do you have this? I'm kind of using this hopefully to prompt you guys to think about your situations, your programs. Do you have a lot of these things? If not, let's talk afterwards. So luck. What role does luck play in the world of entrepreneurship? Arguably a lot. So if we don't really know a lot about it, the programs that we've all built and spent billions of dollars around, if all of those don't work, it must just be luck, right? Well, I don't know. We can engineer for luck if I have to think about how to try, right? Some people are more lucky than others. So collect facts. I think the more facts that you have at your fingertips, the more data you have to make better decisions. So think about not just your immediate facts, think about the world around you, I think is the most important thing. Building valuable social networks. So many of those great stories came from, I knew a friend who knew a friend, introduced me to so-and-so, and that became my first customer. Whatever that is. Making opportunity out of accidents. Again, glass is always half full for most entrepreneurs, being optimistic. And most of the time, the great success comes out of the hardest, the most trying times that any of them face. So then, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's now in the investment seat, how do we then actually predict success? There's a lot of data. You can do personality typing. You can ask for business plans. You could do any sort of kind of analysis. The analysis I've kind of boiled down to is, okay, all the science kind of sucks. We don't really know how to predict success. So if I'm going to use a few heuristics, these are the ones that I use. Number one, is it a good idea? Do other people think it's a good idea, namely potential customers? Is this person motivated? Are they willing to do whatever it's going to take at all costs? Anything that's legal, at least, right? Experience. Do they have the right type of experience to inform them, either themselves or on their team? Right? Back to the spin-out entrepreneurs. That's a huge, huge part of this. The ability to learn and adapt, obviously. Do they have a history of having things happen in their life? A lot of entrepreneurs actually have had, their families, their parents divorced, or they've faced some personal challenge in their lives. So looking at the personal challenges as well as the professional ones that they've already faced. That's essentially what I think I've boiled it down to. So far, so good. So if you take away one thing about innovation, about entrepreneurship, the science really shows that despite billions of dollars, despite some of the best minds in the world thinking about this, nobody really knows how to produce better innovation, more successful, even producing innovation that's less likely to fail. But I do know how important entrepreneurship is. I do know how important it is to our generation, to the next generation, to solving some of the next big problems we have in the world. So we're all kind of lost. So I enjoy you. Just be constantly curious about the world around us and about the facts. There are no 10 ways to start a business or become an entrepreneur or produce true innovation. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. I'm going to open up around to questions. I just have one quick question first. Cold cycle. What is a cold cycle?
Cold circle.
Oh, cold circle.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I must have misread that.
Is it
I think I misread that.
Cold circle. Having people who can challenge you, right? We all have those people we've encountered in our lives. I often like to say and advocate to entrepreneurs, do not have people that are invested into your business. They need to have zero incentive. They just need to give you, the no bullshit, reaction to what you're doing, how you're making progress. They need to be that great, mirror that you
Stepping away from that echo chamber, I guess.
Exactly. And if you don't have that, and if you haven't formalized that as an entrepreneur, as somebody in innovation, you're always gonna get the pats on the back, the false encouragement, I call it.
Yeah, that's a great. I would take that idea. Here, $20. You want to buy it? It's like
Yeah, exactly. Great idea. Yeah. You want to buy
awesome. No. Cool. I want to open up the round. I see the catch cube is in there. Who would like to ask some questions? Perfect. Just one over.
Okay. I haven't seen it. Maybe I missed it. But do you have any data on, let's say, how hard you work? For example, my father was an entrepreneur, and I barely saw him when I was a child. But does that correlate with some success or failure rate? Probably being lazy is not such a good success.
You probably answered it right there, yeah.
But
it's a lot. I don't know, but some of the best entrepreneurs I know are the best delegators. They're the most strategic, the work harder, not smarter adage, I think really plays there. Or work smarter, not harder, sorry.
Good, perfect. Do we have any other questions?
Questions about what you guys are working on?
Oh, yeah. In the back, yes, sorry. Just toss it. Ooh.
Okay, so I made some innovation and then I went for the US patent. How do you think about patent management?
The patents, patents are tough. It depends on what you're working on, honestly. If you've already validated that you have real customers, that it's a process that you have, a box that you have to check. So as long as you know you already have something that you need, the legal fees of getting a patent in most cases are well worth the cost, and especially if you're working in a corporation. That said, I wouldn't hold back any part of the business, almost any part of the business, until it's done. So I'd keep going with other aspects.
Is there any correlation between patents and entrepreneurship and success rates?
There's actually no, there's not, and that's in the book as well. The patents actually have become less and less correlated with entrepreneurial success over time. I don't know what the numbers are, but Carl hits them in the book.
You said the book is coming out still?
In January.
In January, okay.
Yeah,
Did you pre-read the book, or how did
I pre-read the book,
Okay.
An editor of the book. I've been using a lot of the statistics for a while. It's nice to see them all in one place.
Because the Kauffman Foundation really is the source for these sort of things.
Yeah.
My bachelor thesis, actually.
Yeah. They're...
I want to open up to some more questions. Maybe in the front. Gets people moving.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for your talk, first of all. So you had mentioned that there was a study done about the correlation between people that have gone to university and the performance in the workplace, and that not being what we expect it to be. What would you say is the, best alternative kind of education or experience that you would encourage entrepreneurs to have so that they have better performance in the workplace?
Go get a job at a company. Spend on average 15 years there, then start a company. I think that's the number one advice to anybody graduating who wants to become an entrepreneur. I do also believe that accelerators are filling a big void. So if you're working on a company today, I think accelerators end up being almost more effective in education than they are in the actual investment. For most accelerators, I think you kind of have the Ivy League, the Harvards, the Stanfords of the world with some of the accelerators, but for most of them, I think they're doing a great job educating the next generation.
They can start issuing degrees too, that'd be cool.
Right? At least they flipped the economics.
Right.
So in the US, we have to pay $100,000 to get a good education.
Right, they would pay you, actually.
Now the accelerators pay you, so there's something that's working.
Cool business model right there, right? We talked about nonprofits in that sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? Anybody else working on a cool idea? Actually, one question I have regarding that. So you're on the investor side now a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So do you use these statistics when you see a team to kind of filter a little bit? I mean, because if I'm just running the numbers, right, I have 1,000 applications. I have the parameters and I kind of run this to see, and let's say it's, these are the success factors that are more likely. Do you kind of screen based on that as well?
Absolutely. What age they are. More diverse teams are statistically more successful as well. So we're looking at diversity, we're looking at age of founders, we're looking at experience within corporations. Those are probably some of the big ones. And then we're using a lot of the statistics as well around team, because I think once you've identified a market and an idea, it comes down to the people. And so we look at a lot about the team failure rates. Noam Wasserman, who wrote a great book through his studies at Harvard called The Founder's Dilemma, if any of you are interested. He accounts 85% of all startup failures to team issues, co-founder conflicts within the management team. So it actually says once you've identified, created a startup, the number one reason that you're for failure is actually going to be because of people issues.
Because of human issues. And out of curiosity, you do Techstars as well, if I caught that correctly?
Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Techstars, so I'm helping them think about what the future looks like. And then about a year ago I left now to jump in and working in a tiny little town of 3,500 people.
Cool.
In Colorado.
Where in Colorado?
Telluride, Colorado.
Telluride.
It's the closest thing I could find to on-demand in the States.
Ah, okay. A friend of mine went to college in Boulder, so I love Colorado quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Do we have any other questions? Oh, perfect. Yep.
As an investor, how do you manage the failure of the founders? Can you manage that? I mean, there's like the number one reason why startups fail.
I think self-awareness is the number one thing. We do a lot of screening for that kind of self-awareness when the people are coming in. If people are really aware of their strengths, their weaknesses, and how they work with their co-founders, you can get that pretty quickly in a casual conversation. But once you've actually identified it, I haven't figured out ways to rectify it. There's therapists that are probably better qualified for doing that. But I'm not in the business of, I guess, being a therapist.
Therapist in residence. Yeah, that's a new job title right there.
A lot of investors, accelerators that end up being, somehow psychological support for entrepreneurs. Yeah. But I don't know if there's a successful way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Do you have any other questions? Yep, in the back. Just you can toss the cube back. Yeah.
Thank you. Have you made any correlation between entrepreneurship and endurance sports people? They know how to face pain and like Ironman, and so you would at least know that they can go through heavy pain.
One of my colleagues was actually the head coach of the U.S. men's and women's Olympic ski teams for about a decade. And they did a lot of study on the science of how do we recruit people into, specifically in this case, skiing, but it's the Olympic Committee actually does obviously a lot. But the recruitment efforts, just like entrepreneurship, they've proven actually aren't very effective. So all the way from junior sports to professional athletes, the processes, the statistics actually show most of the greatest athletes come from outside the process somehow. So we spend a little bit of time talking about that.
And I guess not many how many Ironman winners have gone on to compete and build great companies?
I guess, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's a values thing that's similar there. Yeah. The dedication, the motivation, the ability to get through anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any other questions in the audience? Yeah, perfect, right. Oh, yeah, not a far throw.
Hi there. So my dad was the co-founder of the alternative bank in Switzerland. And actually right now he wants to do that, but globally. So like a social bank, but globally. Do you think there's any chance this would be successful?
Oh wow, big question.
Yeah, we start off easy, but now we're getting to the real question.
Statistically, it's going to be really hard, I'll tell you that.
Well, you have experience.
I mean,
just wait for the next question.
Look, everybody likes to talk about the social enterprise angle, and I think it comes down to the market. The market's going to decide. If your values as an organization and the impact that you want to have as an organization aligns with the values of your customer base, it's going to work. It's why we all buy in the US, it's organic, here it's bio, right, products, but shifting values will drive the marketplace, will drive better outcomes. So, especially as we become more socially conscious.
And will you invest in such a company? As you're now on the investor side?
We don't invest in the fintech companies, so not part of our thesis. That would be the only reason to, yeah.
And I think it always depends on the individual case as well, right? I mean, absolutely. The complexities behind a social business, they're not natively bad or good in the sense that they can be very profitable.
Yep.
In many ways. There's a lot of companies in India actually that are doing really, really well on both sides of the coin.
Yep.
Drip Tech, for example, is one. They do irrigation systems for farmers, poor side in India. And they actually make quite a bit of money, but they really help also quadruple or quintuple actually farm output. So that really works on both sides. And that's actually very lucrative business.
Well, I think look around the world, right? Where have the world's biggest philanthropists come from? Actually, philanthropy itself was an invention from, I think, a competition between Carnegie and Rockefeller about who could give away their money the most effectively.
Carnegie Hall.
And so they built big libraries, big
Carnegie
institutions, and they happen to have a great social impact. But that was kind of the advent of it, and then hence we had a tax structure then to support it later on, and look at, where is almost 80% of the dollars are coming from like 5 people or something. Bill Gates, now it's Zuckerberg, and
Yeah, the Giving Pledge, I think, is one of the things they
Giving
picked
Pledge,
up.
a lot of the PayPal guys.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that none of those people actually started with a social enterprise in mind, but they're having
kind of looped around, second turn.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to be a social enterprise. I'm saying if you really want to create change in the world, people always ask about building startup communities, innovation communities. Leading Startup Weekend, we worked with thousands of volunteers who led Startup Weekend. They were the ones who made it happen. They always said, what's the one thing I can do to build a startup community? I said, go start a successful company. It's not run a better accelerator, run a better incubator, start a better co-working space. Those are important infrastructure items. But the most impact you can have is actually being a successful entrepreneur yourself.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? Perfect. Well, in that case, I want to say thank you very much for coming out here and sharing this with us. We really appreciate it. Guys, a round of applause, please. We're not going to send you away here with a stylish bag and the sounds to go with it. But thank you very much for coming out here. You'll be around afterwards for lunch.
Absolutely.
So, ask any questions.
I've got some frameworks and stuff for any of you corporate innovators. Worked with a number of folks taking some of what we've learned inside corporations. About a dozen workshops now. I'll share some of that.
You're actually doing a workshop later too.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So please do go after those.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Round of applause, folks. One more thing, I forgot to do this. I usually like to take a quick selfie with the audience here. So let me just get that out of the way. Perfect. I want to end today just with a thank you to everyone, and especially the organizers of this festival. We've had some really, really great labs, and I know this is something that we don't see as much here. But I went to a lab yesterday focused on human-centered design. And actually, can you bring these up? So by pure coincidence, you guys, can you bring these up? So by pure coincidence, we did a lab that was focused on human-centered design. It was about conferences. How can we make conferences better? And I was like, wow, this is great because we have 30 people in here, and we're actually looking at how to make a conference better. So the labs here actually really we build something out of this. And I just wanted to show you, this is something that about 30 people came up with, and we're definitely going to take this back for next year and really hope that we can integrate some of these cool ideas and opportunities that we got from you as the audience into next year's festival. Folks, you can take those back down. We'll keep those backstage as well. But I just want to end by saying thank you for being here. Thank you to all the sponsors for making this possible. We still have labs this afternoon, so please do go out there and take your time to take these last labs. We have the hack this weekend as well, and the meeting point for labs is out there at 1:45. Folks, thank you very much for being here today. My name is Lucas Schleuninger. If any of you guys have any questions on what I actually do, I'll be around. I want a big thank you again to the organizer, Jonathan. He's probably not here because he knew I was going to call him out. But thank you very much for everything. And folks, enjoy the rest of the conference. Digital Festival 2017.